How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing pretty well. I'm currently sitting out in my recording shed, and it's super hot, so I'm sitting inside a sauna.
Oh.
The shed.
Banished to the shed. So I'll probably lose 5 pounds during the episodes. I guess that's something to look forward to.
Okay.
Dedication.
Yeah. Oh, I remember I was on a podcast a year or so ago where almost every day we had to record during this time of day when it was super hot, and I was sweating, and it had a camera too, so I was like sweating every episode, at least for the summers. And then in the winters, really I'm out there in like 3 coats. They're like, "Why are you wearing a bunch of coats?" It's like, well, it's the middle of winter in my shed.
Yeah, and it's not like you can isolate it for air conditioning or now using a fan might be an option, but it's the noise as well.
Yep, no, I just got to sweat it out.
Oh boy, sorry.
Also, I've been processing a video all day, so like my computer's been spitting out extra heat. Yeah. Anyway, I'll be fine though.
Oh boy, yeah. I hope you'll be fine. Just let us know if you. I guess you are hydrated and have plenty of water at hand.
Yeah.
That's good. So, I'm going to introduce you guys. This is Mark MSX, and
hello.
Could you tell us what do you do? We know that you do a YouTube channel, right? You have also a website, Electric Underground.
That's
right.
You've
been working on input lag test setups.
Yes, I have.
A bunch of other stuff, right? Like the shoot 'em up arc. You've been working on that and making comparisons about different ports and different games in your channel. What else have you been up to?
I don't know. I do so much I lose track of everything. But yeah, so my channel is primarily focused on shmups. I throw in some arcade content in there from time to time as well. And on that channel, it'll range from all types of different things. I have a podcast, or I guess kind of like a live talk show, sort of like this, that I do now on Saturdays, where we talk about shmup-related things. And then I also have shmup reviews. I do topics where I blabber on about esoteric ideas around the genre. Yeah, and then a lot of hardware and emulation stuff on there as well. I've covered the MiSTer, covered the Dodonpachi release all the way through. I did a little bit of a fundraiser to make a special version of the Dodonpachi for MiSTer that has a trainer that a few people have been using, which is pretty cool. And that was specifically for the MiSTer, so MiSTer fans, y'all are gonna enjoy that.
We need more of that, honestly.
Yeah,
that helps a lot, right? We'll talk why that helps and why that's necessary. I guess that as we proceed during the whole range of themes that we have for tonight, right? And I'm sure we'll touch on that. But we also have you, Aquas, who have been working on streaming for quite a long time and also have been the host of STG Weekly. And hell, you have several records and are a very recognized speedrunner and gamer in so many things. What can you tell us about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, it's very kind of you to say I'm recognized. It goes a long way for the ego. But no, thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. And I've been doing streaming on Twitch since about the onset of Twitch, a little bit after Justin TV went away, about a year after. And then I kind of started there, and then I've just been doing it since. And then I founded STG Weekly, basically just a show that talks about shmups with fans of shmups in 2015, and have been putting out episodes weekly and then periodically and then sparsely. So
it's a lot of work. It's not an easy work to get the research, right?
Well, you got to round up people. You have to have the videos, and then you have to have people that are comfortable talking. And that doesn't always line up. So it just kind of comes together as it does.
Yeah, having run my channel, I have a much more empathy and understanding for trying to run a weekly show. That sounds like a real challenge, and I'm pretty focused on putting out content regularly. But like he said, rounding up a super player, a super play, and then people to talk over it every single week sounds like a really hard challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it may, some people are shy. I know it's surprising, but, some people aren't that talkative out there. And I understand that. I'm kind of shy in person myself, so.
Yeah, it could be intimidating for a lot of people. I understand that.
Especially
the best way to
especially because you have.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, especially because you have, shmups are kind of like a worldwide genre. people everywhere play this genre, and there's really no group or discrimination towards one group or another that enjoys them. So we do often have people with heavy English accents, and it's been a learning experience enjoying all of those people on the show.
and production is not easy, right? I've seen the green screen that you have, Mark, is awesome.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been a battle. Me and the green screen have had an on and off relationship over the past few years. It's been a real fight. I ended up actually like nailing it to a PVC frame. So it's like sitting on a PVC frame. And then I found out that you needed like really heavy lighting to make it work correctly, but I'm out in a shed. So how did I do that? So I actually have to light I have a giant CRT next to me when I record. Sometimes you can see it in some of the videos. And I have to put on like a pure white image on that CRT just to get enough lighting so that the green screen doesn't look crazy.
The CRT glow.
Yes. Yeah, I remember there was one, I can't remember what video it was. You all just need to watch every single video on my channel so you know exactly what video it was. And people were commenting in the comment section like, Mark, you look sick. You look like, you got a greenish, bluish tint to your skin. And that's because before I was lighting up the CRT with like a blue background, and it made my skin look like I was sick. I was like, no, it's just the lighting. I'm not dying yet, so hang in there.
Yeah, there's so much stuff to account for when you're streaming, right? Yeah, I mean, it's. I believe it's harder to produce edited material than to stream in a way, because when you're done with streams, but it's way more stressing at the time of recording when you're streaming, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Editing videos is like 80% of the time commitment. It takes way more than the actual sitting down and recording.
Yeah.
If you want to do a good job anyway. I always like to sit and fantasize about if I ever had like an editor that I could just boss around and have them do all the grunt work, how much content I could put out there. And sometimes I get a little bit cranky towards whenever you watch these like, multi-million subscribed YouTube channels and they're like, I just can't edit videos anymore. It's like, dude, hire someone to edit your videos. But that's a tangent.
Yeah, but well, that's the life. It's really hard to keep track of everything in every level. That's what I mean. You have to check lighting, you have to check the levels, you have to check the proper calibration, you have to check the captures, you have to check your what you're gonna talk about, right?
Yes, notes. Making sure you're not doing weird things in front of the camera, like touching your face too much. That was a habit I had in my early recordings where I'd touch my face all the time, and I had to like redo entire videos because as I was watching back through, I'm like, I am touching my face way too much. I look like I'm on drugs. So then you have to like train yourself to be on camera a little bit.
But you notice it more than the public, I bet.
Probably. Yeah. There's sometimes where there's been videos where I made where, you know how you put like borders around like the gameplay footage. I remember one video, I spent hours rendering it. I spent like a week working on it. And I got so lost in all that process that one of the borders was like slightly off of the gameplay footage. So there's like this tiny gap between the gameplay footage and the border. And I just expected everyone watching the video to immediately comment, what the hell? There's a gap. Fix it.
Dude.
I demand a refund.
That always happens to me, man. I get that gap all the time.
Yeah, and no one has ever commented and noticed it. So
I know.
Yeah, that's an example.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's way harder because you have more time to change things. When you're on air, it's like, okay, it's done. I can try and fix it while live, but that's it, right? And with your editing, you can go and reshoot, and man, it gets crazy, right?
Absolutely. That's actually one reason why I've kind of turned a little bit more towards the electric live rather than doing as many podcasts, because it literally took me about 10 hours of editing to do the podcast episodes, because I'm so meticulous about, he took an extra breath here. I didn't like that. So I'd go and like remove their breath. He said 3 times. So I've got to go remove your ums. It just gets to be where you do that for 10 hours.
OCD kicking in.
Yeah, we're on a tangent, but I understand.
Yes, I'm very OCD with the audio.
I do the same, and it's because you think people will be more engaged. You don't want your guests to sound like they are making any mistake, slightest, right? you want to just like showcase them.
I know exactly
and try
what
to correct.
Like.
Yeah.
So many people
That's
have
not a good
commented on
idea.
like, well, like some of the SCG we have says like a toilet flushing in the background, and
Yeah.
Oh yeah, one of the favorite one, my favorite one. I actually left it in because I thought it was funny. Was there's a Jamers episode of the Electric Underground. It was one of my very first episodes. I think like episode 5 or 6. And I was such a fanboy of Jamers that I almost threw up before I interviewed him.
Mhm.
And I also was getting like really nervous. You can't really tell that much in the recording, but it was one episode where I recorded it in a hotel because I was on the road and I didn't want to cancel on Jamers. Like, no, you don't cancel on Jamers. So I went into a hotel room and started recording. And like mid-recording, the cleaning lady, she doesn't knock. She just bursts into the room as I'm recording, and she starts like saying stuff to me, and you're like, hey, what do you know? And so I left it in the episode. So there's a part of the episode where mid recording, the cleaning lady bursts in because I thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah. It's
housekeeping.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. And I did this I did this funny meme remix of the interview where it's called Bros Before Tohos, where I took voice samples of Jamers saying things and I tried to make them sound kind of like hip hop lyrics. And then there's a part at the end where she comes in, you get housekeeping, and then I'm like, what are you doing here? And then she goes, oh. And then in the song she goes like, oh.
Holy shit.
Yeah. You got it. So if y'all haven't heard Bros Before Tohos, go give that a listen.
Awesome. So, what got you into games, Aquas?
Oh, since I was just like 4 years old, one of my first memories is watching my brother and dad play Mike Tyson's Punch Out, and my brother, I do believe, beat Mike Tyson. And I was just like, what the fuck's going on? This is exciting. That's like my first gaming memory, and then basically from there, I just kept staying interested in gaming as I was growing up and that type of thing. Didn't have a lot of other interests growing up.
Awesome. And so your first contact was with an NES, but was there any particular system where you got hooked, or was your own system?
Yeah, for sure. We were a Nintendo household. So we had the NES first, and then the SNES, and then the N64, and we actually had the N64 day one that it was released, and I don't really think anything's gonna ever beat the release of that system. That blew everyone's minds. It blew our minds because
absolutely.
When I was growing up, I had some in the neighborhood here where I still live. I had a bunch of friends, and we'd get together and do our like gaming sessions and stuff. But it really took off once the N64 came out because of the 4 controller ports and all that good stuff. Mario 64, GoldenEye, and all that stuff. And I vividly remember when Mario 64 came out. Everyone was over here, and we were just like, we were speechless. We didn't know what to say. Like, it was just so fucking good. Like nothing was like that ever, like before. It was such a leap, and I honestly don't think that's ever going to happen in gaming again.
I agree with Aquas 100% here because I had an extremely similar experience. And in fact, I have younger-ish friends from fighting games, that you go and play like weeklies with them. You end up chatting about things. And one of them, I remember, he was going on this sort of rant about how Ocarina of Time's overrated, the N64 is overrated, the textures suck. And then I had to get, into boomer mode for a minute and be like, listen, son, when the N64 came out, that blew our minds. Like, it was insane. I remember the first time I played Mario 64, I couldn't believe it. And it was actually at my friend's house. And I went home and I had to wait like a year before I got the game. And I was insanely jealous. And every single day I thought about, oh, I wish I had Mario 64 and I'd like draw it in school and stuff. I mean, it was, yeah, I agree with Aquas. I don't think we're ever going to have our minds blown that hard ever again.
It was just so crazy because like you booted it up and then like you're just in the courtyard or whatever of the castle, and then you have the controls of Mario, and then you realize that the analog has Mario doing like 8 different animations depending on how much speed you have with the analog. And that was like, they really went the extra mile to just like let people know like this is how it's going to be from now on. And I mean, some games like actually had that definition of movement, but a lot of games didn't after that. Like Mario 64 still holds pretty good for having that.
Yeah, I remember
So
spending
good.
hours just running around the courtyard, swimming in the water, climbing the trees, looking for Yoshi. It's just yeah, like that game and Ocarina of Time, definitely. I remember, I don't know if I've told this story on my channel. I've always wanted to, but when I used to go to church when I was a kid a lot. I grew up in a very like religious area, and we'd have to go to church for hours. And I remember I was obsessed with Ocarina of Time at the time, and I just figured out how to beat the water temple. I was like, right, and I knew once I beat the water temple, that's when you get the Master Sword, and I was obsessed with that. And then like mid water temple, my parents like, okay, we have to go to church now. Put down your game. You have to go. I'm like, ugh. And I was sitting in church for hours, and we had to go through everything. And I started getting like annoyed in class. I was in church. I was like, all right, move it, Jesus. We get it. You saved us from our sins. Let's move it. And I remember like the Sunday school teacher was like really offended that I was all mad. And then my parents were like, they're like, this is the devil's machine, type of thing. And I got like grounded for a week because it's all Nintendo's fault. So
there was a lot of good stuff back then. For me, like I had a friend that I didn't have a PC, but I had a friend down the road that had a PC and DOS and all that stuff, and got to experience some of that growing up. And then like that same friend, also his dad was a fan of Pac-Man, and they were kind of like a rich family. Yeah. So they actually had a cocktail Pac-Man cabinet.
Cool. That's awesome.
And I got kind of addicted to it because I would just always bum over there and just see what's going on. And it was like kind of a second family type of situation when I was growing up, and I just always go over there and I'd play Pac-Man at least a little bit. And eventually, like, I beat like his dad's Pac-Man score.
Oh, and then you were banned from the household. All right.
Like it was a kind of iffy situation because it was over 1 million points, and I was like 8 years old or something. And his dad, like after I got that score and I beat it, like I was like, man, I feel pretty accomplished. And I came back the next day, and like the dad was like butthurt. He unplugged the machine and reset the score.
Oh my god! I remember.
That's kind of a
this is
weird
this is an arcade
me.
story. I remember going to the arcades, and they had Soul Calibur 1 in this local arcade that was like arcade/bowling alley. And I remember there was some older dude, he's probably in his 20s, early 20s, and I was an 8-year-old kid, and I was just whooping his ass in Soul Calibur by playing Taki and just ringing him out over and over. I knew how to like ring him out really well. And he was getting so mad. And I was like, okay, I don't want this old man to beat me up. So I eventually had to like leave the machine. But yeah, it is funny back in the day how you could get some of the older people salty by beating them in video games.
Like, even as a kid, like, I mean, you're able to pick up on some of these mechanics that really are cheap or like good or effective. And
yes,
that's kind of a cool thing about games, like especially those more simplistic ones is, even if you're a young kid, like you're probably gonna figure it out because kids learn so quickly or whatever.
Yeah,
and,
I remember.
It's kind of interesting.
I remember
just like abusing the ring out. Exactly. For example.
I remember my older brother did that to me in like 2010 or 2011, where we grew up. We played Street Fighter 2 together, and he always beat me down. And then after Street Fighter 4 came out, he stopped playing fighting games and everything, but I was playing Street Fighter 4 and learning all the links and everything like that, and I was like, oh, I'm such a hardcore fighting game player. And then my brother comes over and we play Street Fighter 2 again, and he plays Chun-Li, and he does the 1,000 kicks or whatever it is to me in the corner for like an hour, and I try to anti-air him, I can't anti-air him, and that was after I was playing fighting games, and I was like, this game is such BS. But eventually I figured out how to beat it. But it is funny that some of those tactics that you think won't hold up over time, they can still throw you for a loop even years later.
Oh man, I rented so many games from the video store too back in the day, including like Mortal Kombat 3. That was one that I ended up like kind of getting good at, and like my brother, who was 6 years older than me, he would have like all his friends over and stuff, and like they'd let me in to like hang out with them sometimes because I think they kind of knew I was like good at games, so like I ended up like whooping everyone's ass in Mortal Kombat 3, and they were just like, yeah. Damn, like I don't know what to do, like this kid's too good, what the fuck. I used to use Sub-Zero and get like that 6-hit combo with Mortal Kombat 3. It's very satisfying.
Run up and just do the punches, the run, do the punches, uppercut, sweep, run, do the punches, uppercut, sweep. That was my go-to Mortal Kombat 3 strategy.
Loved Mortal Kombat 3 back in the
I
day.
played that game so much. Did you do the SNES port where you could unlock all the ridiculous stuff? Like you could unlock the Galaga mode, and you can have smoke and all these different hidden characters. Yeah, that was awesome.
It's one of those games we rented a bunch for sure. Man, that's like something that's not coming back as game rentals too.
Oh, that's done deal.
Well, I guess GameFly is a thing, but yeah, I mean, not quite the same.
Soon we'll be, be flying just pieces of paper with codes on it. That'll be GameFly. They'll just write down the download code and mail it to you.
Oh, it looks like we lose Artemio.
I think so. Or he's
Oh.
in the audience because he figured that we're such a great host. He's like, yeah, they got this.
Oh shit. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happened back then.
I'm looking at the. I'll take over as MC a little bit here. I'm looking at the topics list, and this is a great question he had for the icebreaker section, which is, did you ever stop gaming? Was there a period in your life where you stopped gaming?
Yeah, for me, not necessarily, but I definitely was like in and out a little bit, especially in high school.
Yeah.
But it was always kind of a thing in the background for me.
So I went through a phase in high school, and I wonder for people listening, I went through a similar thing where I was a very closeted gamer in high school. I actually kind of still am in my IRL life. Like most people I hang out with besides my gaming friends don't know that I'm in gaming. When I go to work, I let on like I don't really know much about gaming. Especially when I was dating, I'd have to take all my systems, throw them under the bed before the girl comes over. It's like, oh, what? Like it's refuse. But yeah, in high school, I gamed, but I gamed on the down low. I didn't let anyone know that I was still playing. That's when I actually started speedrunning a little bit. I started speedrunning Super Metroid and I would go on GameFAQs and like read about how to speedball and mockball and all that sort of stuff. And but I always kept it on the down low. And then I went through a period early college where I only played Metal Gear for like 2 years. Like I just played Metal Gear 1, 2, and 3 over and over for years, on and off. And then what brought me back to being like a gamer was fighting games when I got Street Fighter 4 and Virtua Fighter 4, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a world-class fighting game player. That's what got me into gaming again.
Yeah, Street Fighter 4 was pretty big. I mean,
pretty big deal, yeah.
Because fighting games were like dead, like essentially dead for like a decade or something, and then Street Fighter 4 came out and it looked like had that painting style, which was very appealing, and the gameplay was also excellent.
I think it was also just a breath of fresh air because at the time it felt like everything coming out on the PS3. This was just from my perspective, being a little less immersed. It felt like everything was a Call of Duty clone or Call of Duty, or some type of FPS. And so it was cool to see like an arcade style game get a major release and get attention. I think that was what I was like, oh, okay, we're gaming again. We're like gonna play some Street Fighter. We're gonna play some these types of games. So it was a big deal for me too.
I mean, that definitely got me into fighting games myself. Street Fighter 4 was pretty huge. Like at first, like I started playing it with my friend, like around here. We just play against each other for probably like a year straight, and we loved it. And then eventually, like I kind of was like wondering, like, okay, how do I actually get better? Like, it all started like basically when I realized you could actually like cancel like a medium attack with a fireball.
Right. Yeah.
4. Like I didn't really like understand the mechanics really all that well at first. And
I remember.
Yeah. And like that really changed a lot of things.
I remember I actually looked on YouTube and followed this guy's tutorial series, and I don't know what happened to this dude's channel. It was like one of those channels that popped up in Street Fighter 4 that had a little bit of popularity and then instantly died after Street Fighter 4 end, or he like, I don't know, whatever happened to him. I actually can't remember what it was, but he wasn't any type of fighting game figure or anything like that I know. But yeah, I followed this just random YouTubing channel, and his advice was like, block, uppercut. So that's what I did. I was like, block, uppercut, block, uppercut. And he's like, okay, now you can do medium into fireball into like a super. And so I like took it really small pieces at a time. And then I learned how to vortex with Akuma, and all hell broke loose then. And I just sat there and tried to vortex people until they nerfed it in Street Fighter Ultra.
Yeah, it really was amazing. Just how like few mechanics you would need to know to like really get hooked in to Street Fighter 4 specifically. I guess. Like, yeah, I mean, it was great. Welcome back, Artemio, our host.
Hey, I went away. Although I know you don't need me to talk, so that's good. At least, yeah. The ISP went down, and it was because some water damage to the hub.
Oh boy.
Yeah, but I have another half, so I just swapped it.
Wow.
Yeah, good.
Cannot be
Eventful.
stopped.
Good. But it wasn't something more serious. Although water damage there, man, completely unexpected. I need to figure out where that came from, but fixed. Sorry. So,
figured out.
So I think we left off on how did you find out about MiSTer? And I believe Aquas knew about the MiSTer before I did. And I'm going to cheat because I found out about the MiSTer from Aquas. I was spying on his channel and I saw it and I was like, ooh. So
Nice.
Aquas better answer this question because that's how I actually found out about it.
Well, yeah, it kind of goes back to All Anonymous, who does builds for people at cost value, and he's been doing this for basically since he actually had gifted me my MiSTer, and the reason he did that is because he knew that I was going to play the living shit out of it, and I have been, and that's so. I mean, you can really thank him for that, and I wasn't like I knew about it a little bit before, like he had gifted me one. But I wasn't convinced about like what it was actually capable of because like the first time he showed me it was in a hotel room, like off of like a hotel room TV, and I was like, well, I don't know if I off of a hotel room TV. I mean, what is this gonna be like? Was it just an emulator machine or was it like a Pi or whatever? But yeah, eventually once I started trying it out myself, and he sent me one, I was like, okay, this is just like very little input lag and works really good through HDMI, and just started kind of going from there, and everything's kind of worked pretty good. So
was there any?
Went from there.
Was there anything in particular that really catched your eye, or that was fully different from what you expected?
Well, being able to use any USB device is a big deal because I love to use arcade sticks.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to use arcade sticks for NES, SNES, TurboGrafx, and arcade games, and basically anything you want. I mean, that's a pretty big deal for me, and the lack of input lag. I mean, that really goes a long way, especially because we're kind of in that era prior where input lag was kind of like shut under the floor, like the carpet, so to speak, like virtual console. Like Virtual Console on the Wii was never really that good. Like, but like people like just accepted it. But like, it kind of goes back to that Life in Gaming documentary with M2, like where they say like they want to preserve like the actual culture of gaming by having good like a good input delay, because like that's how you play these games like effectively. Yeah. So yeah, kind of was like all from that.
That documentary, I was asked to help on making those questions for the M2 crew.
Oh, that's really cool.
I was so worried about which questions to make, right?
It turned out so well. That I reference that documentary all the time.
Yeah,
it's
I like it.
I remember it's like by far my favorite thing on My Life in Gaming. And I remember in like a Q&A episode or one of their episodes, they're like, yeah, it's not all that popular of a video. No one really cares about it that much, but we did it because we think it's cool. And I was like, well, I care about it. I think it's cool.
They put so much love into it because we already, I usually go and just like fact check some of the things on my areas of expertise. That's all I do for My Life in Gaming, really. They do the whole thing, obviously.
I think it's you can kind of get that vibe from it. I think it's hilarious. Like the shot, I just love it because it shows how passionate the Shot Triggers team is, specifically the guys who work on Shot Triggers. Because they're basically like, no, whatever. Let's talk about shmups. Okay, let's talk about Battle Garega's rank system. Let's talk about the special weapon system. And you can tell the audience is like, what is this? I love how passionate they are.
they did an amazing job doing that documentary.
Yeah, that's a classic, I think, of shmup content, because it's basically interviewing, I think, the best shmup porting team ever. I mean, their ports are absurdly good, and I can't shill for them hard enough. It's just the M2 Shot Triggers team. It's incredible, and I always kind of have this theory that everything they're doing makes absolutely no financial sense, and their bosses are like, what are you doing? Okay, we have so much more time and resources we could be spending for profits. And they're like, no, this is important. You know, there's, you know what I mean? I always kind of feel like they're being, it's like the definition of a passion project, where it makes no sense financially, but they are just so passionate about the games that they're going to do it. Like
what he mentions about doing the Fantasy Zone 2 arcade port, right? Same thing. That's awesome. And talking about, you mentioned input lag. We have to define those terms. We'll talk a bit more about those in a minute. But before that, there's also the issue that you mentioned, arcade sticks. So, which do you prefer, Sanwa or Senmitsu?
Senmitsu. Nice. Absolutely.
Sanwa.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Senmitsu too.
So Aquas and I are gonna have to, battle it out here to win your votes. I'll give you my reason why I like Senmitsu better than Sanwa. It's because Senmitsu has these little levers on their micro switches that I think when it comes to playing shmups, they give you a little bit more control over the tension, and they give you a little bit more control over when the activation occurs. And so you can get these very, very, very precise, tiny little dodges with those more reliably than you can with the Sanwa, which has more of a pop to it. And so I think that's one of the main reasons. The other reason is I think just the Sanwa levers themselves are just heavier. They just have more support. They feel like you could bludgeon someone to death with them. They just feel so rock solid that I definitely prefer the Sanwas or the Senmitsus. But that being said, I actually don't play Senmitsu. I play on Korean stick. So maybe that's the third hidden option where I actually play on Korean stick. I don't play on Sanwa or Senmitsu. Nice.
This is relevant to the audience that's listening, because it's going to be a series of little details in the chain, right? That we'll detail later on. Oh, I'm again dead.
You're alive.
Oh,
you're alive and well.
Sorry. Sorry. I thought, again dead. So it's going to be a lot of details that we'll go over, because there's a series of things, right? From how you feel the dead zone on the stick, how you feel, how much force you need to pull the lever or move it. Like you mentioned, the different micro switches make a difference, and that goes to the USB encoder, right? Or directly into the core, and all that adds up, and also to the TV. So
I will also say this though for Sanwas, I feel like as far as actual real world, you need to beat the game, you need to play the game. I think the difference in performance between them isn't like this night and day thing where it's like, you play in a Senmitsu and all of a sudden you're just a better player. I think you could get away with playing on either lever completely fine. You can play very high level on a Sanwa just like you can on a Senmitsu. I mean, these are just tiny little differences. And for a long time, I was a little bit more of a controller elitist, because there's an episode where I say, like, never play on a 360 pad. 360 pads are pieces of garbage. It is not possible to play high-level shmups on a 360 pad. It's just not possible. And then Gus comes around and is doing all his stuff on a 360 pad, and I'm like, all right, I have to eat my words a little bit here. So at the end of the day, if Gus is getting Mushi Futari Ultra Clears live on a freaking 360 pad, the game is open. You can definitely get away with playing really well on either level completely fine.
Yeah, I mean, that guy supports like my preference for Sanwa is like, yeah, the differences are small, but if you're really like itching for that little bit of extra help, like, yeah, changing to a Senmitsu is probably a good idea. But like, it is definitely a fact that like D-pad versus stick, like D-pad's going to be able to respond faster because you have the instant neutral when you let go of a direction. And with an arcade stick, you're waiting for the lever to move to neutral.
That's right.
So
also
there is that
taps, right?
There is that difference.
This is why I actually like Korean sticks. Yeah, you've opened the door. where Korean sticks have this real nice snap back to neutral. It's just like pops right back to neutral super fast. So it's kind of like a middle ground between the feel of a Sanwa and Isomitsu, where it has a nice pop to it like a Sanwa, but it has those nice levers on the micro switches like a Famitsu, and it has a very unique tension where it gains more tension the further out your input goes. And I just really like the feel of Korean sticks.
And it doesn't.
I only play on Korean sticks, so.
Does it have any? I'm guessing this is from a spring or some sort.
No, so Sanwa and Saimitsu both use springs, but Korean sticks use a rubber grommet. So there's like a little spring that provides tension to the whatever it is, the actuator on some of them, on the crown sticks, I think. But for the most part, it's all in that rubber grommet that provides tension.
You're creating new needs for me now.
Yeah. Another thing, too, is Korean sticks are definitely more durable than Japanese sticks. That you could beat your Korean stick with a hammer. It'd probably hang in there. But I've been to a few arcades, actually a lot of arcades, where, we had one Sanwa at one of the arcades in my local area. It was a Marvel vs. Capcom 3 machine. And it had been, like, snapped in half. It wasn't even, like... kind of bad. The stick was like snapped out of place because Americans are mean to their arcade cabinets. So. I think that's part of the reason why Korean sticks are also really useful. Is they're pretty tough.
Sanwas are really tough too, though. Like that's my other support for Sanwa is that the OBS F32, I think, stick. That's the arcade standard, just straight up. So that's the majority of arcade sticks you're going to run into in Japan. It's going to be that Sanwa stick.
I've heard a lot of the shmup machines have Saimitsus in them.
I don't doubt that, but like, still, the Sanwa is king. Like,
yeah,
over there.
It's easier to find a Sanwa, but you do find Saimitsus, and some cabinets came with Saimitsus from stock, like the Capcom Impress. It's not the shoot 'em up cabinet, but it ended up being used for that, right?
It might be a thing where Saimitsus were probably a little bit more popular in the past, so maybe older cabinets probably came with Saimitsus, and nowadays the Sanwa's the hotness, so maybe they come with the Sanwas. I like all the arcade sticks, but I mean, you can't go wrong with any of them.
And it's a whole thing to learn about because of you need some adapters and faceplates depending on which models you are using, right?
Probably, yeah.
Well, square gauge is standard, but
yeah, there's also gates like you just mentioned. But I was talking about the plates that you need to attach them to certain cabinets.
The mounting plates. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think
mounting
Sanwas
plates.
and I can't remember because I think Saimitsu plates nowadays have like you could fit them on Sanwa cabs these days, but maybe older Saimitsu sticks have different plates. That's possible.
Yeah, they did. At least in a few Impress, you have to get that. And also the connector, it was kind of different in some cases. I'm guessing it's more standardized nowadays. I don't know. You guys should know better than I do.
No, I'm not cool enough to have a cabinet. I'm sitting out here in a shed.
No, but I'm talking about when you're a kid stick that you're using, what do you use to mount them or replace them? Or is it just standard stuff?
So the Saimitsu sticks and Sanwa sticks that I own, they both have the same mounting plates.
Okay.
As far as like, they both can mount on the standard mount. The Korean, you got to get a little creative with it because they need special plates, and you need to, if you have a full collar Korean stick, you need to drill a hole to make more room for the collar. So mounting Korean sticks is a little bit more complicated, but these days, if you go to like Focus Attack, I'm pretty sure if you buy a Sanwa or a Saimitsu, both of them will be able to mount in like a Hori case or a regular case. I think they've made it so that you don't have to worry about that as much these days, I'm assuming.
I see. And you mentioned the restrictors, Aquas. That's a lot of topics in one thing. And to which restrictors you use?
Four-way all the way for me. I've tried 8-way. I've tried circle gate. Like they're cool. But 4-way just always feels the most natural to me. I like having the square like that you go in between. And that's like something that's actually kind of a big difference between the Sanwa OBS F32 and the LS 32 from the Saimitsu. I think I'm getting those numbers right. But anyway, like everyone compares the LS32 Saimitsu to that Sanwa stick. And like the thing with the Saimitsu LS32 is like when you bring the stick like around the square, you'll actually feel like kind of some notches in the corners of the square. And like that was completely not cool with me. Because like I went to I was playing an LS32 on my friend's cabinet, and I'm pretty aggressive with the arcade stick, and I was just trying to ride like the gate, like kind of ride the corners like very heavily, and I was even like shaking off some stuff on top of his cab, because like I just kind of get into it like that. But like the LS32 has like these like little bumps in the corners. As I understand, that's not a thing with the LS56. I haven't used one, but yeah, for that reason, I don't like the LS32 because I'm a very active player with bringing the arcade stick to the absolute corners where you don't feel any resistance except for the square itself.
I will say that if you go from a stock Sanwa to a stock LS32, at least from the stock LS32 that I bought, it's probably not going to be a fun time too, because the LS32 stock ones, at least the one I got, have like really light tension. That was just the one I bought. It was like really light. So I always like to mod my Senmitsu sticks a little bit. So I replaced the plate to give it a nice regular square gate. So so like Aquas is saying, you don't have to deal with the funky the plate. And then also I actually like to add in a little extra spring tension onto them too, make it a little more snappy.
And as I was saying before, this all adds up, right, into how you feel the game. And back when you're controlling a ship, it just feels better, right? More natural.
Well, that's the nice thing about arcade stick is like your whole arm is invested in those in those motions instead of just your thumb and your finger. So it's like, and for that reason, it's also easier on your fingers and hands because you're using more of your whole arm. So I always tell people if they're having issues with like their hands and stuff, like maybe you want to look into getting an arcade stick because you might be able to extend your like gameplay sessions and that kind of thing. And I definitely go back and forth between controller and arcade stick for that reason, so I can kind of keep things rolling along.
And how do you set it up?
Completely. Like,
do you use tables? Sorry.
Oh. Go ahead.
I did use a table for a while, and then eventually I just got used to playing in my lap because of like going to fighting game tournaments and stuff, which I did for SF4.
And you, Mark?
I play on my lap. I'm not happy with it, but it's necessity at this point because I sit on the floor. I guess maybe that's like authentic Japanese style. I sit on the floor and play all the games. Yeah, I play. I actually got a little like this little mini chair that I sit on now because I can't get a chair in here. There's no way. So I have this little, it's like a legless sort of back support thing.
Those are great. Japanese ones, right?
Yes, exactly. I sit on the floor when I play, and so I have to have it in my lap. I think if you can get it mounted to a cabinet, that is the best deal because it's not going to slip and slide, and you can get a little bit more control over it. And so, but of course, that's hard to pull off. And I have seen players like mount with like braces their sticks to tables. I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. So if you got the space for it, maybe mount it to a table, something like that would be pretty cool. But yeah, for me, I get away with just sitting down and having it on my lap. I think that's why having a really good case is important. And I try to have a nice hefty case so you're not slipping and sliding.
Yeah, there's definitely some slipping and sliding going on. And you just kind of get used to like pulling it back and kind of fixing your orientation and that kind of thing.
I've
just
considered
depends on
like
how heavy it is.
Yeah, I've considered putting like Velcro on the bottom of it, but then I'd have to wear like special Velcro pants or something when I play.
Well, those Quamba, all those Quamba sticks have like a more traction on the bottom.
Yeah, they have like
a
mouse.
Plate.
They have like a mouse pad thing on the bottom. Yeah, I've considered that too.
But the true sign of arcade stick player is seeing the like sweat from your thighs that like builds into the steel plate on the bottom. Or you can look in the bottom of your stick to see how used it is.
Or the hand gunk on the faceplate. If you play a lot, you get your hand gunk on the buttons, and you gotta
wipe that gunk away.
You gotta clean that off. Yeah. But
some people don't wipe away the gunk though.
Get out of here.
Now that you're talking about that, do you grease the sticks? How often do you change the? Yeah, I know. So
definitely.
How often do they need to?
So I remember I neglected greasing one of my sticks for years because I didn't know you were supposed to do that, and it did get grindy and catchy, and it would sometimes catch on inputs and stuff. So I actually have no idea how often you're supposed to do that because I play on Korean stick now, and it's you can grease those, I think, a little more easily because the actuator's just right there. But yeah, I think if you can keep it nice and lubricated, that's going to help you out a lot over time. You're not going to get sticky inputs.
As long as you got that little like circle around the stick, I don't think much is going to get in there. Like my Hori VXSA for the 360, like that thing still feels like really damn good, and that's my most used stick from like 10 years ago, and it's all Sanwa.
Yeah,
and,
I think also
I have no issue with that.
I think also where you play makes a difference. I play out in a shed where dust flies around in here. Like I'm sitting in. I'm weird. I'm like sitting out.
The dust cover. I think that's what those are called.
Playing. But if you're playing in like a nice, clean room, I doubt you'd get too much buildup or issues.
Those are called dust covers, right? The little circle around the stick.
Yes.
Yeah.
But before we get away from the gate discussion, I just wanted to point out a few thoughts on the gates because I was really into gates for a really long time and trying to figure out the best I could which gate I thought was the best. I play on a Korean stick, so you play on this sort of like soft square gate where it's not necessarily a circle gate because you get a little bit of corner action, but they're much softer than a regular square gate. But if you're playing on a Japanese stick, I would recommend a square gate for that. And the reason for it is you have nice short cardinal directions, so you go up, down, left, right. It's a really short distance to the gate, and I think that's nice because then you have less travel backwards. But then you have these really nice deep diagonal inputs, so you can always hit those diagonals. Like you're not going to miss the diagonal. The problem with playing on circle gates or on even octagonal gates or whatever, 8-way gate, whatever it's called, is that sometimes you can like miss those diagonal inputs. Like let's say you're a Tekken player and you're trying to Korean backdash a bunch. If you have an octagonal, at least in my experience, sometimes you end up grinding right over that diagonal input.
Yeah.
Whereas the square gate, you just have that. You cannot miss the diagonal. I mean, you have to be doing something terribly wrong to miss that diagonal.
It's reassuring, right, in a way, because the octagonal one, it just feels like so loose. There's no control. Yeah.
But you can get kind of like stuck in between inputs where you go for the diagonal and then you hit the thing between the diagonal and the cardinal. I'm sure there's some scenario where the 8 cut is good. I don't know what it would be, but I'm sure there is some scenario like that. Maybe DDR or something. I don't know, but
I think it's just like for people, they just kind of like feel that might be more natural feeling.
Yeah, that's true. It does feel a little bit more user friendly.
But like for me, it's not the case.
Yeah, so I would say if you play on Japanese stick, go with the 4-way, the square.
I've seen a lot of people get arcade sticks and they're like, well, I'm not really feeling it. Like, it's my first arcade stick. Maybe I should change to 8-way or something. Like, no, just you gotta train up a bit. You gotta do some deep dragon punches times a million.
We all know the best, though. I mean, I'm surprised it wasn't brought up before. The best is the diamond, where you flip the square the wrong way. And so you don't have diagonals. You just have up, down, left, right. That's the way to go.
That sounds weird.
Sounds
too weird for me.
I remember some guy in my local scene where playing fighting games. He was setting up his arcade stick and he didn't realize he had his gate rotated the wrong way. And so he had like up, down, left, right, and he couldn't have any diagonal inputs. It was funny. I'm kidding, of course. The diamond is not the way to go unless you're playing Pac-Man or something.
I've never heard of people using the diamond, but that's interesting.
I think it's like required it used to be required for like Donkey Kong or something. You weren't allowed to have there's some Donkey Kong player out there that either I'm going to make them happy because I'm right or they're going to murder me because I'm wrong. But I thought it was something like in Donkey Kong, you were banned from using diagonal inputs because you could use them to manipulate things that you're not allowed to manipulate or something.
I think that's just a 4-way stick games originally.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Makes sense. Like some arcade games are. Ghouls and Ghosts.
Isn't the urban legend that the birth of the square gate was they just took those 4-way stick games and they just rotated it sideways and there you go. There's your square gate.
I have no idea.
I heard that before.
And as for the buttons, we didn't really talk about the buttons, but Saimitsu tend to be slightly harder to press, so you're not going to get accent presses as often. And Sanwa are like the very sensitive. I'm not sure about Korean.
I'm going to probably agree with Aquas here. I like Sanwa buttons a lot more than Saimitsu buttons. Like, I'm a much bigger fan of the Sanwas, so I always play with Sanwa buttons.
Yeah, I don't mind sensitive buttons, but I can definitely see why having a slightly more of a tension to the button might be beneficial for someone who's
Well, the problem
kind
that
of
I ran into,
butterfingers.
the problem I ran into with that is, so I bomb with my thumb button. With my thumb. I don't bomb. Well, I guess my thumb. It's my thumb button. Wait a minute here. Hold on. My thumb is
Yeah.
on the button, so it's a thumb button. I bomb with that. I don't bomb with my ring finger.
That'd be
And
button
so-
4. I
Yes.
think.
So instead of hitting with my ring finger, I hit with my thumb. The problem with that, with the Saimitsu buttons that I ran into, is you would kind of get this sort of half press and it wouldn't register. So you just eat the bullet in the face because the bomb didn't register. So that's why I like the more sensitive ones, because even if you kind of miss it a little bit, it'll still go off.
Well,
And,
yeah, that's
the
like a
twitch.
thing. Like everyone's like, I bombed. Damn
Yes,
it!
I
No,
always
you
say that.
didn't. Like, no,
Listen
you
to me-
didn't.
Listen to me stream for about. Oh, I say it all the time. If I stream, you're gonna hear me say it like 8 times. Every time I die, I'm probably gonna say, "I bombed." It's the input lag, the stick. My
Well,
favorite
the guy
though,
in
my
like our
favorite's-
community,
yeah.
we called it the John bomb because his name was John. But he'd always complain about not bombing in time.
Yeah. Well, I
Shouts
think
to
too,
him.
if you're a Toho player, that's a little bit of a rude awakening, because Toho gives you a little extra window to bomb there.
Dude,
It's
the
like-
death bomb, yeah, that's such
Yeah.
a cool mechanic.
Yeah, but then
Where it
when
allows you
go
to
play
bomb, that allows you to bomb after you've been hit.
Yes, you get a little window there.
Genius.
It's like a little hit confirm, like in a fighting game. Bam, bomb. So, but once you learn that, then you try to play a cave game. You're in for some rough times, because you're gonna go for it and you're gonna die every time.
Apparently, we lost Artemio again. That's no good.
Oh no! So we better get to speedrunning and your expertise on it. So, what do you think about the MiSTer in terms of speedrunning? How would you compare it to software emulation, like RetroArch or whatever people use, SNES 9X or whatever they use for software
Well, I mean,
in speedrunning?
yeah, I mean, emulators are pretty much fine and all. I mean, if it feels good to you, you're pretty much good to go. And there are actually people that have ran on actual hardware and then have ran on like leggy or like TVs and such, and they can deal with it. You know, it's just kind of like where you want to start out and what's important to you. But once you start getting to like more of the technical tricks, but like these tricks that require you to do like a button input on one frame and then a button input on another frame and then like a release of a button on another frame, like that's something that's going to be harder to do if you have a delay, because there's that kind of breathing room in between.
Absolutely.
And that can be kind of a questionable ground and something that you probably need to practice more often. And then it'll also kind of like throw you off. Like, it's just kind of, you know, as one would imagine, like if you'd want something to respond faster, like the faster you do it, like input lag is almost like being drunk or something. Like if you have too much input lag,
Yes.
it's like you're not going to be getting the correct judgment on your inputs unless you're planning ahead of time. And ahead of time in that case is like 0.1 second. And
Well, also-
judging that from a human is difficult.
Well, also too,
So-
the problem with that is, well, there's two things that come up. One is, in some emulation setups, the input lag is also not 100% consistent. So let's say you learn the sort of weird off-kilter drunk timing of playing on like a laggy emulator. And some people have argued this, like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Input lag doesn't matter because you could just learn the off-kilter timing. Problem with that, though, is one, sometimes that input lag window isn't 100% consistent. So even if you learn that timing, one run, you will hit it on that weird timing. The other run, there may be a little less lag, there may be a little more lag, and you miss the window.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's
the-
all about consistency, right? So the less input lag you have, the more consistent you're probably going to be.
Yeah, exactly. The other issue
So-
is some games, there is no 100% anticipating everything that's going to happen. Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, for example, you're going to have to react at some point to something. And so having that, the more input lag you have, the smaller your window for reaction becomes. So yeah, that's when it becomes real nasty to try and react to things when you're basically playing with weights on your legs and you can't get things off in time.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on the game, and then, I mean, there's kind of a threshold for what input lag is acceptable, and for me, like, that's 4 frames. Like, 4 frames out of 60 is kind of like the acceptable. And then anything beyond that is like,
Some people will find that to be surprisingly high, right?
I'm not far off. I will play 4 frames if I must. If it's like you have no choice, I'm sure Muchi Muchi Pork comes to mind for Aquas. If you got no choice, you'll do it. But
like, to me, that's a 3-frame game.
yeah, but anything beyond 4, I won't play personally. I'm much more of a stickler with input lag than a lot of people.
Yeah, like, we have like these numbers like
notoriously.
3, like 3 and 4 and whatnot, but like it ultimately comes down to your feel of the game. So
I'm always really happy if I can get a 2 framer. That's really nice. I think 3 is what you run into a lot on like really good console ports. You usually end up with about 3.
And how
some
are you?
PC ports you can get real low. If you play RetroArch and you play with some run ahead, you can get 1 frame out of that thing, and it's impressive.
And how are you counting those, including display lag?
I try to play on CRTs because I think it's always a little bit tricky to 100% know your display lag. Like, you can look it up, and like, I've approximated it at times, but I've always felt like if you can get it onto a CRT, that's the way to go, because then you're hitting it at the fastest possible. You're not going to get any faster than a CRT. So that it's just, and it's also very baseline. Like, we all know, okay, it's a CRT. It's just very consistent. But the thing about input lag tests is my methods are a little bit behind the times, because when I started doing them, the kind of gold standard that I was seeing was you get an input, you wire a light to it, and then you get like a high-speed camera, and you can get a really, really good idea for how much the lag is that way, where you press the input, the light shows up, so when the light shines, you're like, okay, that's frame 0. That's when the input was activated, and then you can count after that by frame. Okay, it takes 2 frames for him to jump, takes 2 frames for the ship to move left or right, that type of thing. But now I'm seeing people that are doing all kinds of crazy stuff where they're like putting things on top of their TVs, and it's measuring. There's like a much more scientific method of input lag reading that gets real detailed. I'm out of the loop on that, but that's impressive.
What you're doing is scientific,
Yes.
but you're counting everything, right? You're counting the lag from the encoder if you're using one on the
whole
stick.
system, yeah.
You're counting the emulation or the PCB or the MiSTer, everything, right?
Everything.
And also the game, because some people don't think about this, but the game has to have a cycle where it pulls the input, checks it, renders the output, and displays it. And it's usually the other way around. It displays the results of the games, of the previous frame input, right? And then calculates and takes the input for the next frame. Could be that way, or could be I take the input for this frame, calculate everything, render, and the next frame will be with the user input in mind.
It really is game dependent.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, some games are notoriously laggy in themselves. Even if you had the best TV, the best arcade stick, the best everything, the game itself is just going to be a laggy boy. Like Grega's kind of like that. And then other games are just like that. They just spit out the inputs super fast. So it really does depend on the game and your overall setup. That is the biggest issue I think with my method is what I try to do is, because I'm a big arcade stick fanatic, so I try to find the most responsive arcade stick for that system. The most, so for PS4 I try to use the Brooks boards, and that's hard to test too. But yeah, if you could get like they're doing now, where you eliminate the input device itself and you eliminate the display itself, and you just measure the game, that's impressive. Or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, they measure everything. You can measure the device, right? The encoder and the USB input, or even snack in MiSTer. And you can measure what the game does, you can measure what the system does, and you can measure what the display does, and add it up, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
So now that we're talking about this lag and display lag, and you use a CRT, what do you use, Aquas?
I through my MiSTer, I use a two CRT TVs, one a PC monitor and one a Sony Trinitron tube TV. So
Awesome.
the tube TV is through VGA through component through the MiSTer, and then I actually split that signal also to my PC CRT. So I take the VGA signal, split the VGA signal, I split that as well to my PC CRT monitor, which I've now made a dedicated vertical setup for my personal setup, which has kind of worked for me. But yeah, I mean, component through the MiSTer is awesome. It's the best way to use it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really practical how you have a HDMI and also the analog out at the same time. Do you guys end up using that for streams in some way?
Oh,
For
yeah, for
recording,
me,
yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
That's like a lifesaver, right? Because you had to do a bunch of stuff.
It's so convenient. It's perfect. It's honestly awesome.
Yeah, it simplifies things a lot. People might not imagine what you need to do to stream a PCB or a game console sometimes. Because obviously using capture hardware or using the monitor in the capture software adds lag, no? So it's even worse in that sense.
It depends on how you're doing it. I made this whole video. It's not all that popular because people don't really care about this too much. But yeah, I made a whole video about this. How do you capture? For me, it was my PGM with, while playing it, how do you capture it? And yeah, there's actually a lot of different ways you can kind of go about it. The way that I do it is I run my PGM into my OSSC. I run my OSSC into my capture card. My capture card has a pass-through. So then it'll pass through and capture. So there's the capture. And then from the pass-through, what I do, this is kind of ridiculous, but I plug it into this adapter that I found that doesn't have any lag. It takes HDMI and converts it to VGA. I think Retro RGB actually covered this thing too. And so you don't get any extra lag there. So then it becomes VGA. The VGA goes into my Extron Emotia, and then my Extron Emotia spits it out as S-video into my giant Sony Trinitron. So there's a lot of steps in between there. Or if you want, you can just do to an HDMI monitor. I have a really nice Asus G-Sync monitor. I really like that as well. So I kind of go back and forth. I sometimes play on my G-Sync monitor. Sometimes I play on my CRT.
Yeah, it's just a rat's nest of cables, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I'm gonna burn alive in one of these mid-recording, mid-stream. You'll see me burn alive one of these days.
And you have to tape everything to the floor if possible, so that you don't just move one single cable, right?
Yeah, I did tape things to the floor. How do you know?
Oh, because I do the same thing.
We must have a similar setup going on here.
Yeah, of course I do. I do some shows for I stream direct PCVs, all the soundtracks from Sound Test and that kind of thing. So I don't play. I suck at playing, but I love the things. So I kind of know how MiSTer simplifies the setup so much.
Absolutely.
Component through the MiSTer is so good. It's the best way because then you're playing the games. Well, especially through my CRT TV, you're playing them like they were pretty much intended originally. I mean, the big TV. That's the best part. I love it. So good.
So
playing Dynasty Wars and Ghouls and Ghosts on this big CRT TV. It's almost pretty much identical to the arcade experience. Especially when you got the arcade stick. You just don't have people running around and people smoking in the background.
Yeah. And you also,
so good.
To get the authentic arcade experience, you need to one day break your stick and just have to play on a broken stick for a day, and then file a complaint, and then come back 3 months later and see if someone's fixed your stick for you.
Sanwas are too good for that.
That's the authentic arcade experience there.
And some buttons that are not right.
Yeah.
Speaking about buttons, do you have any preference?
Sanwas for me.
Yeah, San was here too. You?
We talked about it a little bit.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't hear that part.
I will add in
I'm
that
fine
I
with
do like
Sanwa.
the noise dampening. You can get noise dampened Sanwas. That used to matter more because I used to actually play inside at one point in my life, and so I tried to keep it a little bit quieter. Now I'm out in a shed, it doesn't matter, but I still have them in there, and so yeah, they feel nice. They're probably a little less sensitive than if you have the non-noise dampening ones, but if you live in an apartment and your roommates or family are getting annoyed by your constant smacking of your stick, you can install those.
I haven't had much issue with that, but it is a thing. Like some people definitely hit the buttons harder than others, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. I remember one time I was at a FIFA 4 casuals in like my local scene, and I was just doing I was just in a match, and I was just like hitting my buttons so hard, and this guy is just like, "You're hitting your buttons too hard," and like, no, man, just fucking no.
But
Like you,
maybe
like that's the
your
thing with
strategy.
arcades is you're able. I mean, that's all up to you how hard you want to hit them. I mean, it's your arcade stick. Who gives a shit? That was like the weirdest comment I ever got from someone.
My favorite is
And that's like a strategy too in fighting games, like hitting the buttons like harder, like not as hard.
Mm-hmm.
I hit them hard, and I've had people hit them more hard than me. This one T-Hawk player I went into, like he'd like do like the ultra with T-Hawk, and then like in between the ultra he'd be like tapping the buttons like super hard, like in the rhythmic of like the T-Hawk animation.
well, you know,
It
a
was like, that's
classic
awesome.
a classic strategy. This is an arcade strategy for y'all. It's called dead button, where you have a button and it doesn't do
Oh, yeah.
anything,
Mhm.
and so they're sitting next to you. And let's say
Gotta
it's
throw
like,
them off.
yeah, it's like, let's say you're playing Street Fighter or something, and you want to trick them into thinking you're throwing a fireball. You do the hand motion, then you hit the dead button, and then they jump, and then you uppercut them. You're like, aha!
Oh man,
That's kind of next
That's
level.
a real
but
tactic.
Yeah.
And
that sounds so dirty. And
yeah, I remember a while back in the Street Fighter 4 days, there was some controversy where the Japanese players felt it was disrespectful for the American players to be doing this, to have dead buttons and everything. Because Japanese players, they play head to head, they don't play side by side. And so if you're playing in the US, there's this sort of meta strategy. It's a little dirty, but sometimes it happens where you can see their hands out of the corner of your eye, so you can see, okay, they're winding up for a fireball, they're winding up for a super, and you can kind of react to not only what's happening on screen, but their actual hand motions. And so the way to combat that is to have dead buttons or to fake like you're doing an input and things like that. And I remember that was throwing some Japanese. I think Tokido was one of them that they were getting mad at this sort of stuff.
It's a big difference. I mean, for me, it's just like that arcade mentality. Like anything, for me, it's like anything goes in an arcade as far as the strategies and whatnot. So and like as far as like background noise and like hecklers, and when you see like hecklers and like some of these Street Fighter 4 tournaments from back in the day. And
some
like
of them
I was
are
at
a little much. I'll say that. Some of them are a little much.
Yeah, but like that's the arcade like experience. Like you can't control people around you when you're in the game. So you just have to deal with that, and like that was definitely a theme that was prevalent like throughout a lot of these tournaments that were going on with people side by side and like having like their homies behind them just cheering them on and trying to like screw up the other guy. Like you'll see that in like some Evo videos. They'll have their team like trying to like heckle the other guy and distract them. But like it all goes, the onus is still on the player in my opinion. It should be all on you as whether how you deal with that background noise.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've dealt with this in person a lot of times where I usually would show up, as not the fan favorite because I just would travel by myself or with like one friend and, you're going on their turf type of thing. And sometimes what's funny is sometimes it'll work against the person getting cheered for, especially if you start taunting them and stuff, and the friends are like, no, and you start taunting them, and they actually get in their own friend's head because they're freaking out. Or I actually kind of enjoy that a little bit when people are cheering against you, and then you start beating them, and they get salty and tilted.
Yeah.
I've always kind of enjoyed that a bit.
Yeah, I love that Wild West feel of this arcades and just people surrounding it, like. Anything goes, and like I'm totally for that. And I don't know, maybe that's being lost in this politically correct climate these days. But I love a good dirty arcade experience. Is all I'm saying.
Well, for me, I always kind of strike a middle balance because sometimes it's like everything I've done, it's all in good fun. Like every tournament I've gone to, I've never been that afraid of anyone. But there were times in the arcade past where people were like legit criminals, and there are stories of like people getting beat up in the parking lot afterward or whatever. And I'm like, that's way beyond gaming.
I think the famous stories are like when Super 2 was out, like how good throws were. So if someone throwed too much, they'd get like bullied basically after the game.
Yeah.
because throws did like third damage. But
Yeah.
like, come on, that's just the game. Like, come on, blame Capcom, I guess. I don't know.
So, talking about the different experience. Well, we were talking just now about the different experience about the environment and what we would have loved to have like the shoot 'em ups scene here, right?
Absolutely.
Because we lived, I'm guessing from your ages and mine, the fighting era in the arcades, right? But that difference also could be felt in some way regarding changing it to a home experience, and in a home experience when you're talking about differences in preference, right? Is MiSTer offering you something that you feel different from software emulation in general?
So I think overall, the MiSTer is a huge upgrade over almost all the other software emulators that I've used. I have a soft spot for RetroArch specifically because it has certain features that reduce input lag. And that was always my problem with software emulation. For example, Aquas brought up the Virtual Console. And I remember I got Super Metroid on the Wii Virtual Console and I tried to speedrun it. And there's certain sections in Super Metroid that are very precise. For example, there's this part, I can't remember the exact term for it. It's like the moat jump where you have to run across and you don't have any items all that much. And you have to do this jump over this body of water. And then there's this tiny little pillar out in the middle of the screen. And you have to not land on the tiny, instead you have to overshoot it and wall jump off the back of it. And it's an absurd input, even on real hardware. It is a ridiculous input. And like the first time you try it, it'll probably take you an hour to hit the input. It is ridiculous. But it's even worse on Virtual Console because the lag, it's so hard to time that initial jump and then that second jump. That's why for a long time I was like, I have to play this on original hardware. It's not even like me trying to be elitist. But then RetroArch came out and you could pull that off on RetroArch. But the cool thing about the MiSTer is that certain input lag reduction is actually banned in a lot of speedrunning. So for example, in Super Metroid, they don't allow you to use run ahead. They ban it. So you have a little bit extra lag over hardware, at least in my experience. So that's why the MiSTer is such a great compromise where now you can record in a high quality. You don't have to get all the RGB cables and OSSEs and everything. But you're still able to have that input lag, and also, like Aqua said, you can play on arcade stick, and I actually play Super Metroid on arcade stick. So I used to have to do this special setup where I took a Super Nintendo controller and then I wired it to what's called an undammed USB converter, and then that's how I used to connect arcade stick to Super Nintendo back in the day. But now, just being able to plug it directly into the MiSTer is so much nicer.
Yeah, especially since they came out with the overclocked USB polling.
Sure.
That made a difference, no doubt about it. It was decent already with like the low latency setting, because you can have in the MiSTer you can have like the low latency setting, or you can have the latency, or I think it's at 0 instead of 1. But like low latency is supported by most things on the MiSTer except for GBA. I have some issues capturing that with it. But yeah, if you once you combine the overclocked USB polling, which the MiSTer now does just pretty much naturally, as well with the other bit, like it's really good. It's pretty much there. Like it's so close to console. It's really hard to measure. And you can, because I recently got the RAFnet SNES to USB converter, and that one has like a setting to like set the clocking to like 1 millisecond instead of like 4 or something. And yeah, that I'm really pleased with that converter. But like I think pretty much anything you use, like there's that spreadsheet that Porkchop Express made. Yeah, like that spreadsheet's cool to look at because they do show you like the latency between the different devices. And I thought that my like some of the Hori sticks were in the middle ground there, but like I'm very satisfied. Like it's still better than any emulation as far as input lag goes. It's just the way to go. It's great.
You also can throw a Brooks board in your Hori. So if you want to upgrade your the controls inside your actual arcade stick, you can modify that and throw a Brooks board in there. Those are, from what I understand in my testing, very responsive across all kinds of different things on the PS4, on the Switch, on the PS3, on the 360, on the PC. The thing's a beast. So I always recommend that.
I guess I was going to say, versus like HDMI versus CRT through the MiSTer. Like, yeah, like ideally you want to go to like a CRT, and then you also want to have that overclocked USB pulling, and then like you're good to go. But like I can notice the difference playing an HDMI a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. You know, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. I've done plenty of playthroughs on through HDMI.
It basically adds the display lag or the capture lag, right? On top of what you already have. Yeah, exactly.
Not much, but I have some good HDMI monitors personally, so it's like not that bad. But if you're trying to play on some random thing you got at Walmart or whatever,
I
don't recommend it.
An uncalibrated and an unidentified lag device, yeah.
Yes.
But I bet it with that USB overclock, it'll still probably be decent. That was a pretty big deal because that came out sometime after the MiSTer had been out for a while. So
yeah, you mentioned RetroArch and the frame ahead. What is it? Why is it banned?
I had an argument with them in their Discord for like a day, and they would not budge. I do not know why they banned it.
I have ideas, but okay.
They seem to think that it gives you an advantage over the original hardware. Yeah. And my experience is like, not in my experience, but maybe if you do it just right, you know, and you're playing on just the right setup with maybe like an overclocked USB or something, maybe you could get a little less lag than original hardware. So that's why they say they banned it. They said it's just too good. It's just too hot.
It's hot because I think, and I'm just speculating here, but we mentioned that different games have different routines to check the input and display the output, right? And for those in the audience that don't understand how this works, I'm no expert, but it basically runs the emulator in several instances, right? Mm-hmm. And picks up the correct future, let's say, right? From what you input, your input was. Thing is that you could get two good results because if you do that, you have the issue of if a game takes like 2 frames to detect your input, like you said with Garega, for example, and you are doing the run ahead, then you probably can hit that mark in emulation faster if you are not doing all the video and everything, right? In one of those multiple universes.
With certain games, it's absolutely, you can do that. Garega's one of them. You can run much faster than the actual hardware. With the Super Nintendo, the Super Nintendo is a pretty responsive system itself. So, I mean, yeah, I could see it's a slight difference, and maybe that's the problem. I always thought it's an interesting sort of philosophical conversation, though, that are we bound to the original hardware forever? Is the original hardware the gold standard forever? Or as we go through into the future, when we start getting, let's say they release, well, Nintendo won't ever do this because they're not cool enough, but let's say they released Super Metroid and it had a port on a really good system and it was actually faster than the original hardware, then could you use RetroArch? It just gets interesting to think about because as we move into the future, with like the MiSTer, for example, maybe the MiSTer could be faster than the original hardware. Is the MiSTer banned now? It just gets interesting that I personally don't think the original hardware should forever be the point of no return. As long as we start getting stuff like RetroArch or the MiSTer, that's fairly accessible. But that's me. I'm a little less of a hardware purist.
I understand your points. I'm gonna comment on them, but first I'll let Aquas comment on them after I mention what the chat has said. RetroPress said that Run Ahead was banned because SFC Hegane can accidentally be played 1 frame too fast. And Katrinix mentions that Run Ahead works in a way that frame rates and things can make it more responsive because of the hackiness it does with the input. And Giliaxian says that Run Ahead is a strange subject because I try to get in to make sure input lag is reduced, but you're also pulling out from the accuracy that this bites into the subject that you were talking about that I'd like to comment further. But what do you think, Aquas?
Well, I just got back from the bathroom.
Oh, no problem. We're talking about Run Ahead and how that might affect accuracy. And Mark made the point that he doesn't think that original hardware should be the bar against we measure in the future.
I think original hardware is always the de facto standard. If you can get faster than that, like I can definitely support specifically like speedrunning communities like banning it. But if you can actually use run ahead to get to original hardware latency, that's definitely good.
Well,
I guess
there's
I
some
would go with
interesting sub points here that I think is more shmup specific,
Mm-hmm.
because the thing about like Nintendo games and Super Nintendo games is that they sold millions of copies and they're pretty widely available. But there's certain games that this becomes actually a really interesting conversation, like Mushihime-sama Futari,
Mhm.
where the port of Futari on the Xbox 360 actually has a mode that reduces the input lag.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
removes VSync basically to make the game extremely responsive, even for a 360 game. And then on top of that, the slowdown of the Futari port on 360 is a little slightly bit different than the arcade PCB. There's certain sections that have more slowdown than they're supposed to, basically.
Mhm.
It's still pretty accurate, but there's just these slight variations. And my argument has been, the PCB of Futari is actually very uncommon and extremely expensive, and most players actually play on the port. And the port also has this ability with some methods to remove the counter stop now. And so there's a lot of things that the port does that the original hardware just cannot do, and yet more people are playing on the port. So then I start to say, well, at what point is the port the go-to rather than the original hardware? I mean, if everyone's playing on the port, if the original hardware is hard to get, if most people are setting record scores on the port, does that now make the port the gold standard? And I feel like this is coming up with the M2 stuff too, like Grega. This is coming up with Grega. I wouldn't be surprised if Mogler here soon gets the world record of Ketsui on the PS4 port. SPS and all these other players are playing on the PS4 port. And these ports have gadgets. They have slight
Mhm.
variations over the original hardware. So it does become interesting at some point where we say, okay, the port is the way to go now. Like that's the standard rather than the original release.
I fully understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. I believe that categories should be enforced, and not necessarily the PCB would be the gold standard category. I agree on that. But I believe that we can measure the original hardware right now and try to replicate it as closely as possible in order for it to make it democratically accessible, like with the MiSTer, right? That would probably be a game changer in some instances if you can measure and compare how well behaved against the original hardware it is.
Well,
When possible, of course.
The interesting part about PCB versus like recent ports
Mhm.
is, again, it would divide certain eras of players
Mhm,
from each
mhm.
other just forever, because like Mogler, maybe he'll get a PCB one day and re-get his world record on a PCB. But let's say he the PS4 port of Ketsui is extremely accurate. I mean, it's
Mhm,
very,
mhm.
very close. And so if you split them away from each other, then the world record wouldn't be quite as meaningful as if you put it alongside the original PCB world record. And so again, this happens in speedrunning, right? Where different world records are achieved on different platforms, and sometimes they're split, sometimes they're not split. It just depends on how the
Mhm.
community does it. And so score splitting is interesting. I'm probably way too nerdy of a topic for this this
No,
podcast.
I think it's important because obviously MiSTer is part of the puzzle here. I work with different communities and trying to get this right everywhere. And what I've loved about working with MiSTer is that whenever I'm able to measure something to the best of my ability and it differs from original hardware, they're interested in fixing that and going for accuracy. Right, and I believe that if the community that has or owns PCVs and wants them to be preserved in the most accurate way should go this way. For instance, there's this topic that we have in the list talking about audio sync, right? Because I'm guessing, I'm not certain, that you sometimes go by audio cues, and it's important how on-frame audio is, and it might never been a subject to you, or it probably has. Has it been a subject to you how on-sync audio and video are?
For me, absolutely. Because there's certain audio cues in Donanpachi that requires you to, you have to know the soundtrack, and there's like a certain time in the soundtrack where before a pattern appears or before something happens, or if you time your chain to certain audio cues. Oh yeah, audio cues are huge. especially if you're in a chaining game.
And in emulation, that could be a big issue because you have more stuff, not because it can't be achieved, because you have like probably somebody in their home is playing their PS4 port of Ketsui under HDTV, and the HDTV is 1 frame of lag, and then the home theater is 0 frames of lag, or maybe it is 4, who knows?
Yeah.
Are they on sync?
And never even thought about that.
And that's a big issue. On the 240TB test suite, you have a pattern that allows you to check if the audio and video are on sync if you capture it, right? And I think that we need more of that in arcade PCBs and everywhere to achieve that same equality level where you can go to the powers that be on each leaderboard and say, okay, how can we certify this to be a valid platform, to be as valid as the arcade PCB, right? Which measures should we adhere to, like precision in sync between them, precision in frame rate, because also frame rate is an issue, right? If you're playing, just say Super Nintendo, okay, and you're playing at 60 instead of the 60.1 whatever, should that be an issue, or shouldn't it? And arcade PCBs that sometimes go down as low as 55. If you are changing the frame rate to 60, does that change your experience? Does that change the validity of the record? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it does to some extent. I think that the most important thing is just like acknowledging that these changes are there.
Yeah.
And then you're able to, compare with the correct knowledge. Like, is this, pretty much the same thing, or is it like, did it actually make it that much harder, or less, or it just all depends on how drastic that difference is. Like a Kai Katana, the PCB for that game, the cave one of the later cave shmups, like that PCB has way more slowdown than the 360 port, and it drastically changes it because the patterns in Kai Katana are like batshit insane. So like the PCB is like, it's easier to dodge a lot of that stuff, and that's kind of like been a theme through a lot of these ports, is the slowdown is kind of like more heavy in certain sections or less. And if it's less, then it's probably going to be a harder experience, and then you have to judge it then based off that harder experience. Like, oh, okay, well this might be a little bit less score, but they did it without the extra slowdown, so this is probably like more impressive.
And it's also the issue of moving the flag. What I'm saying is, let's say that you make the Xbox 360 port the de facto standard for Futari, okay? And then you have the retro compatibility, I'm air quoting here, because we all know that's a different executable. How do we measure if the Xbox One executable of that retro compatible game, if it even is, I don't know, works the same way? It is not. Okay. But when and if it happens, how do we measure that? And then when all Xbox 360s are as rare as an arcade PCB, that will happen sometime eventually, how can we measure if that's accurate?
No kidding. That's the $1 million question. Also, you can now play Futari on your PC through Xenia, and Xenia seems to be pretty... Now, okay, I'm not sure how accurate it is, but from what I've tested, it seems fairly accurate. It isn't like... like Aquas is saying with some of the ports where it's just missing slowdown and all that sort of stuff. Xenia does a pretty good job of making it feel pretty consistent to playing on the 360. So wouldn't that be interesting? The standard moves from the PCB to the 360 port to emulating the 360 port, which I think could be possible.
Yeah, Xenia is nice. Seriously, everyone's got to check that out if they want to check out some of those Xbox 360 shmups. It's good. It's up there.
Yes, it's very good. And when they start adding save states, ooh, that's going to be hot. That's going to be real good.
But what I think is, if we can document the PCB properly on what the timings were, and we can have, like, for example, an FPGA implementation open source that could be future ported to any other FPGAs or devices, that's hardware documentation, then that's easier to maintain than an Xbox 360 emulator.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that already with a lot of the arcade cores in the MiSTer.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it in maybe a decade from now, those 360 games and that era of shmups getting an FPGA in the next generation, or whatever it's going to be.
Here's a really interesting wrench in that equation that might be a little bit of an issue for shmup players specifically, which is, now, personally speaking, I agree with you 100%. If we could get all these games on the MiSTer and convince everyone to play on the MiSTer, that is a win. That is great. The issue is that the Japanese players will not do that, and their events do not allow any sort of emulation. And I tried this. They will force you to play the ports. Even if you can play it on RetroArch or play it on the MiSTer, you will have to play it on a crappy port if the port's bad, over playing it on something like that. That's a huge tough one. So that is one of the advantages of the 360 ports like Futari, where even, the Japanese events would allow you to play that, where they would not allow you to play the MiSTer version, which I don't agree with. But they're very, very strict about
what I'm saying is that
emulation.
It's best to have options and not close those options for the future, because they're gonna hit a brick wall when that Xbox 360 port won't run. We all know that 360s are not reliable. How many have died on you?
Maybe the silver lining is that time and technology will force the Japanese players to play a MiSTer. Like, they'll have no choice, because the 360s will die. And then
measurement. Published measurements and public measurements. I'm not saying that I want to do this all, or that I'm capable of doing this all, but I believe that everyone that has a PCB and that has like an oscilloscope or has logic analyzer or whatever, and can measure and compare their PCBs to the MiSTer output in any term, timings and scan rates, whatever they can contribute to, that will help. And document that publicly, because usually these kind of things are just discussed privately and never published. If we publish those results and say, okay, this is the measurement, this is how the PCB behaves, this is the CRT signal of the PCB and how it feels the monitor, and this is how the MiSTer signal does it. It's different, yes, fix it. Is it the same? Then that's fine. Same with audio, same with sync. Everything of that should be public and documented, so that the general public has an archive, right?
Another thing is, you could get it so accurate that they could never tell the difference, and so you could just be like, "Yeah, I got the PCB. I'm playing on PCB. Sure, yeah, I totally have it." And they can't tell. The emulation or the hardware simulation is so accurate. There's no red flags. There's no red herrings giving you away that you're actually not playing on the PCB.
Well, there's also like the aspect of original hardware actually varying, because the capacitors fading away and stuff. As I understand, that can be a thing too.
That can be a thing. Yes, so, we've worked on that.
So it almost makes it less reliable than the MiSTer at that point.
Sometimes it could be, but if you have a big enough sample of PCBs, or in this case, let's just say Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo, every single Super Nintendo you've tested, tried, sounds different. And you probably don't mind that, because the difference is so minute, so small. But it is there, okay? And emulation in general has taken the approach of just using a specific sample rate for the audio. And it's off-pitch in every real Super Nintendo that you use. And if you use a Toslink mode, then you're listening a slower signal in some cases, or maybe at the same rate. It varies. Yes, you're right, but we are at the time that we can measure it and compare it between different sources. In 20 years, we won't have that.
Yeah, I know. I think people need to look further ahead here, as far as, people who tisk the MiSTer, tisk emulation. I run into this all the time. Those, oh, no, original hardware only. Fast forward a few years. Oh, look what they're doing. They're playing on the MiSTer. Oh, they're playing on a software emulation, because there's just as time goes on, right? It becomes more scarce.
Indeed.
And also, there's just so many features and so much accessibility, and it's just the way to go. That's what I talked about in my video about the MiSTer, is that this seems like the strongest way to go. This seems like the strongest way to preserve these arcade experiences, but in a way that it can be replicated into the future.
Yeah, I want to see the big companies eventually taking an FPGA. Like, that's definitely
they're going to do it too.
Needs to happen.
They're going to do it.
I don't
it's a decade
think so.
from now, like, whatever, like, that'd be great.
I don't think they'll do it.
No.
But 10 years from now, let's say Capcom, the FPGA, because I know FPGAs are pretty expensive, but let's say 10 years from now, it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and Capcom want to do their 100th version of their arcade collections, and they need a new gimmick. They need a new way to sell this. So like, hey, we've sold it this way, we sold it that way, we've done this, we've done that. We need a new thing, FPGA. And then they, like with their arcade stick, oh, well, some of that open source software finds its way onto a Capcom port, and there you go.
It
The weird
has
thing about
happened.
that is like,
Maybe
I have to
there.
acknowledge.
Mami's there already. Sorry, Aquas, what were you saying?
Well,
Interrupted
like, if that happens, like, they have to acknowledge that, like, some of their ports in the past, like, may have been substandard.
you. Yeah,
And,
and
like,
they've even
they have
been
been.
using MAME, right? The latest arcade compilation
yeah.
from Capcom uses MAME and has incorrect audio
Pretty
because they couldn't license that part of the software.
Well, wasn't the stick, that stick they sold, wasn't that
Mhm.
using Final Burn Alpha? And that was
Yeah.
like a big splitting point on why we got Final Burn Neo. It had something to do with Capcom, right? Wasn't
That's
that
right.
Yes. Okay, that was the insider baseball on that.
Yeah, but what I believe is that streaming and game streaming services will overtake any of that physical stuff. So I'm way more pessimistic than you in that sense. But yes, Capcom could just keep pushing things.
Oh, you don't think we'll get another pile of what mini consoles and stuff 10 years from now? That fad will be over.
I think so. Yeah.
I could see that actually. I could see that happening.
Yeah, I don't know, but it could go either way. But if it goes that way, I see it like being a streaming platform that is just a small Raspberry Pi and streams their stuff. I'm cynic about that.
I think Sony tried that a little bit with the PS Vita home one. What's that called?
Yeah, PS
It's not
Vita
the
TV.
PS Vita.
The TV.
Yeah, the PS TV. That's actually kind of a cool little thing, but I think that was kind of the early example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, who knows what will happen? But what I believe is that we have to tackle the problem from several ways, and there's this two-sided or three-sided discussion that we need to have open in the public. Like, speedrunners can validate that things are different or the same at a way different level that somebody like me that measures can do, and that some like a developer can do. And
That's right.
we need to just collaborate and get that publicly documented and out there, right?
I mean, it's such a technical level of detail we're talking about here. But, like, as far as, like, the general audience of, like, people enjoying the games, like, if they can enjoy it and, like, thinking there's nothing wrong with it, like, that's great.
I agree.
But as soon as, like, the general audience is like, well, there is something wrong with this, like, that's not good.
No, of course not. And my approach has always been like, I know that 99% of the public won't mind if the Genesis matches the audio of an original Model 1, but the idea here is that even if they won't mind, they will listen to it in the proper way as a consequence of this work.
Kind of just a matter of, like, setting that standard.
I'm more of a snob. So I'm gonna go, yeah. Like, even if people accept like bad ports, they accept the Psycho collection on the Switch, which people yell at me because I gave a bad review because it was laggy as hell. Even if they accept it, I'm more of a snob. I'm like, no, you just don't know what you're missing. Like, it's like once you play the better version, you'll be like, oh yeah, it is better.
You can't play Psycho games without snappiness.
Yeah,
Those bullets are so fast.
It's brutal.
That's just how it is. But,
Psycho
like,
is...
I don't know. People just have that nostalgia and stuff. Like, they just, from like, what I've noticed is, like, with the Switch, it's just the people are buying these shmups, and so they're just making more of them. Like, that's how it works. Right?
You know,
They're getting treated. This is a whole. I rant about this in the whole video. They're getting treated like they're mobile games or something. They're getting treated like, oh yeah, throw Psycho games on a little collection. They're laggy, they're inaccurate, but it's $10 and people can kind of just play them for 10 minutes and move on. I'm like, no. And what kind of is a pet peeve of mine is people don't do this with other genres. They will lose their minds if they come out with an RPG and one line of text is incorrect. People will freak out and be like, no, they're disrespecting the legacy of this RPG. But yet, arcade people, we're expected to just be like, yeah, whatever crap you throw out there, we'll just accept it. But I just think it's a little bit of a weird thing where other genres get much more respect in this regard. Like, they make sure they usually try to do a better job with other genres, making sure they're faithful to the original releases.
They probably are easier to deal with than the shmups, right?
Yeah.
Just to be fair, I'm not saying that I'm all right with them doing this. Well, I see these compilations as a way to get licenses if you care about that stuff. That's the only value I see on those. Like try out the stuff if you don't know it, and buy a legal license of the games if you don't own them, and just transplant that license into an elsewhere. That's the only value.
It's such a catch-22.
Yeah.
Because let's say Psycho comes out. I dealt with this when I did my reviews for Nintendo Life. They make the Zero Div do a bad job on the port. I give it a negative review. People don't buy the port. The company says, "Oh, these games aren't worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just stop making them." I've had this argument with people many times. But the flip side of that is they bring out a bad port. We all give them 8s out of 10s because, everyone else does. So let's give it 8 out of 10. And so then we send this message, just do whatever and we'll all give you an 8 out of 10 anyway. So it's like low expectations. So my always thing is if you can try to strike that middle ground of maybe being a little bit lenient, but also critical on the technical side of things to try and get them to take a second look at that. Maybe that's a good compromise.
Yeah. Thankfully, we have M2.
Yes. M2, you can avoid all this. Just buy the M2 port and you're good.
Yeah, but M2 is not without scene either. The audio sometimes is not perfect, that kind of thing, but lag-wise and in features, it's amazing.
Yeah. I heard that they did I'm mostly familiar with their Shot Triggers projects because that's what I pay attention to the most. But I heard that didn't they make the Sega Genesis Mini, and that was kind of meh. That was kind of like, come on, M2.
Yeah, but it's under commission. I'm not saying that they are without fault, but it's not their passion project, right? It's like a paid project, and I bet that it's hit and miss because they have a budget and they have a time, and they aren't allowed to go as deep, or they aren't as passionate about it. Who knows?
Yes.
Yeah, that's something that could happen.
I mostly heard positive things about the Genesis Mini and these mini consoles, so as long as it's mostly positive, and they're playable and not too bad with the input lag. I know it's like variable input lag, I guess, with the Genesis Mini, but like everyone I've seen of them playing those games, it hasn't really been an issue. Like they're still fun.
Yeah, they are still fun.
That's why I don't review them on my channel.
I'm a purist.
I'd just be a bad guy. Everyone would hate me.
I'm too harsh as well, but I understand they have a public and they work fine for the general. Most people that buy these mini consoles is just for the nostalgia and having some trophy in the shelf.
I always think if you can push sort of a middle ground like the analog systems, I think they're overpriced. I think they're very expensive, but I like the MiSTer much more than those. But I mean, like for my brother, for example, the MiSTer is just a little bit, too involved for something like that. But instead of giving him like a mini, instead get him like an analog, whatever it is, Super NT. You're getting that FPGA experience, but it's a little bit more accessible. I think that's kind of a nice compromise there.
Yeah, agreed.
Though it's a shame they didn't have the analog output built in. That's why I didn't buy one. I was gonna buy one, and then I heard they had to like buy a separate thing for the analog. I was like, all right, never mind.
Yeah, it's probably because most people won't use it, right? It's such a niche feature. But for us,
just the hardcore guys like us, I guess.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I don't know if you've played way much with the analog out, but it's very interesting. What I found is that it's like an idealized version of RGB where you have like perfectly centered, and have to recenter everything or rebalance colors. I like that.
Oh yeah, it's so bright and vivid on the MiSTer. That's because I don't have an analog, but on the MiSTer, the VGA output is so vibrant and beautiful. I love it.
Mm-hmm. And what if you're using like a regular console or an arcade PCB? What do you use to line double up to your CRTs?
I use OSSC.
And you, Aquas, how do you usually deal with that?
Well, I don't own PCBs, but I mean, I do have like other consoles. And for that, I just typically do S-Video for the retro consoles, which is very, very nice.
Yeah, it is.
Through the GV USB to Japanese capture card, which actually has tricked a lot of people on my stream. They think it's RGB or something, a better capture, but it's just S video. It does a very clean 60 FPS signal, and then just HDMI for 360, PS3, and etc.
A
for
nice,
the MiSTer.
a nice little device too is the oh, help me, Art. It's the
XRGB. Oh, the RetroTink is
RetroTink.
amazing. It's amazing.
Yes, I recently bought a RetroTink.
A 5X
actually-
or a 2X?
No,
Okay.
the old one, the
Yeah,
Pro old one, because I needed
amazing.
S video on that bad boy. And the reason why was actually to capture VCR from VHS Super Play. So I bought these rare VHS Super Plays of Dodonpachi and had to capture them. And if you try to buy a commercial VCR capture card, the ones that I was getting, they can't handle the 60 FPS action, and they crash. So I needed a RetroTink to do it. And I've been very impressed with this little thing. So that might be a great thing to look into, Aquas, because it has S video output, so you could get it. You could upscale
Input.
it.
Yeah.
And
I've heard great things about it, but
input. Sorry, input. So you could scale it onto your PC from S video. You wouldn't have to get the whole RGB setup, because I was like you. I didn't want to. I tried to RGB mod my Super Nintendo, but I lost motivation to do it. So it's a nice little compromise there, where you can use S video but still upscale it.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
For me, I've been pretty content with the GV-USB 2 because it doesn't have to deal with any of the resolution switching. Like, it just works through the standard definition capture.
Does RetroTink have any issues with resolution switching? I haven't
Nope.
experienced that, so I don't know.
No, they
I know
are
that's
amazing.
an issue with some other cards, but yeah.
It's a highlight. It's a highlight of the new products, where you can switch resolutions on the fly, and it doesn't lose a beat. It's amazing. I've checked with Chrono Cross and with Symphony of the Night and Silent Hill, and everything's fine. And also,
Those are great.
And sometimes the MiSTer, the MiSTer will resolution switch.
Yeah, but it's mainly because
True.
if you're loading a core, or if the original console resolution switches, well, the MiSTer has to follow the original resolution. Yes, of course.
So wouldn't that be funny if you had to output your MiSTer into a RetroTink or something?
Good thing is that you're usually plugging it into a PGA or CRT, where it doesn't matter.
You don't have to worry about that. Yeah.
But
maybe
for
on
HDMI,
your capture setup, you're that hardcore.
Yeah, maybe there. But of course, the HDMI out of the MiSTer, you can configure it to be fully buffered on at 60 frames and have the original rate in the PGA out. So that's amazing, because you have both worlds working perfectly.
So in your expert opinion, do you think the RetroTink's going to take over what the OSSC does, like that aspect of the market?
I've not put out my review on the RetroTink yet, but I believe that it is the best you can get for no frills, no setup. It's so easy to just plug and get everything going. The only thing that I would be missing, I would completely just like shove my OSSC into a drawer if it have BGA in, because I use a lot of retro computers like PC88 or X68000. Yeah. But aside from that, it's been amazing.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes I put VGA into the RetroTink. A lot of the times it gets mad at, or not the RetroTink, sorry, the OSSC. A lot of times it gets mad at me though. So.
Yeah. You have to deal if you're using some obscure stuff like the X68000 or the PC88. They have different frame rates and different ports, and it's a mess. You have to.
What I was trying to do, and maybe I just don't know the settings of the OSSC that well, but I was trying to upscale 480p to 1080p through it, and I don't. My attempts were not working out. It was not handling it. It was like, no, get this crap out of here. But I don't know if that's possible on the OSSC.
It is, and it's really good
so
at
I'm just
it.
doing it wrong.
It's not that easy. You have to dial in the stuff that you need from the menus. Well, yes.
So then the OSSC still got it. Still has the magic.
Exactly. And for the RetroTink, I've been using like an Extron 192 to combine the sync. But it's a bit messier than I'd like it to be, because it's so simple in general. But I like to check arcade PCVs in the nearby future, because I use the NAC splitter. I don't know if you know that for JAMA.
I'm a heathen, and I use the that board that everyone yells at me for using for JAMA. It's the one. It's like the Retro Fighter or something. Everyone
I
yells
don't
at
know.
me not to use that board because it blows up your PCB or something.
I have no idea. But well, arcade PCBs are also hard because you get the different video levels, and you have to just set that up for the OSSC or any other. You have to attenuate the signals.
Yeah. Luckily, I only have 2 PCBs. I have a PGM and then I have Strikers 1945 too. Those are
Awesome.
my 2 PCBs.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm gonna do some stuff on my Strikers PCB here soon.
That's great. It's you were mentioning Psycho before, and it's just such a sniper game, right?
I'm saying, you know, it was only $140, and for a PCB, that's not that
Wow,
expensive.
that's really good.
It would be a little bit hilarious for me to like go back and re-edit my Nintendo Life review and be like, you know, just buy the PCB. But I'm sure people would not accept that. But if you want to get rid of the lag, there you go.
And talking about lag and how the speedrun community, how has the speedrun community in general, from your perspectives, accepted or not emulation and hardware emulation? Aquas?
Well, speedrun.com recently actually allowed MiSTer to be a selectable platform.
Hmm?
I think they also have the other FPGA consoles as selectable platforms, but now they're actually recognized as platforms instead of just, before that I was just taking the emulator box and then just saying I was playing on the MiSTer. So they're actually they're noticing it now because so many people are actually trying it out and using it. So that's great. But still, like, you know, it's not original hardware. It's FPGA, so it is separate still. But you know, it just all depends on what the community is like. On speedrun.com, every game has its own community, and it's really up to the discretion of the communities as far as how they want to compare different platforms and whether they think it's important to separate all the platforms and the methods and whatnot, or if they just want to like group them together just to like build a community and like kind of get things going. For me, I just, you know, I mod some leaderboards on speedrun.com, and mostly I just want people to submit times, and that also goes into the area of like detecting cheating as well, because cheating is a thing in speedrunning as well. It's like it's as anything really. But like for me, like when I approve a lot of these runs on these leaderboards, like I'm just looking to see if they're playing it. If nothing's too fishy, like it's good to go. Like I just want people to see that these games are being speedrun. But that can backfire on you.
Yeah, I honestly feel really bad for speedrunning moderators because there's this real trend on YouTube and stuff where I think in the beginning it was like well-intentioned, where people are like, yeah, you know, there's issues with cheating on speedrunning. It's not all flowers and daisies and happy-go-lucky sunshine. Like, this is something that needs to be paid attention to. But there's also, I think, a trend a little bit where people expect some of them, they'll make like expose videos or like, oh, on this frame, the mods didn't pick this up or that up. But it's like the mods are there to like kind of glance it over. They're not going to frame analysis everything.
Yeah,
it's not
everything's
a world record.
volunteer.
They're not going to sit and
like that's what I'm saying. Like everything is volunteer on speedrun.com. Like it's not Twin Galaxies. You don't really want to compare it to that. I mean, and then like
Twin Galaxies is such a sham anyway. It's such a sham because
I mean that's kind of gone to shit and stuff with all the Billy Mitchell crap going on, and
well, even outside that, they're because I looked into maybe submitting to Twin Galaxies a few times. I have a whole podcast on this, but their proof requirements are so ridiculous that it actually makes it hard to submit stuff to them because they want you to like ID yourself. I'm not going to ID myself to submit a score to you guys. Sorry. And I remember Pearl submitted a replay from Battle Grega, a legit one from the console, and it got into like mod hell, and they like, no, this can't be real, and he had to like, it was a big issue and all this type of stuff. Like, it's hard to get stuff on there. And then on the other side, there's just rampant cheating going on behind the scenes. So it's like basically newcomers, new faces are held to these crazy standards. There's this video I made on my channel that's really funny. It doesn't have a lot of views, but I think it's actually really funny, where I read all the requirements to submit a Donkey Kong score to them. It is hilarious. They start talking about power supplies and like, it's this whole song and dance to submit a score to their Donkey Kong boards, and yet on the other side, they're just emitting VHS tapes and they're just letting anything fly if you're part of the boys club. So yeah, I don't have a whole lot of respect for Twin Galaxies, but I don't want to get sued or whatever, so I better stop there.
Do you think that it would help in some way? I'm just throwing an idea out there to have like a validation in the video of authenticity. Like I don't know if the emulator of if MiSTer could just like have some watermark that guarantees when captured. I can't imagine how it could be done, but something could be.
And the thing is like people are so fucking crafty these days.
Yeah, but
there's
like
this
cheating and stuff. It's like
there's this version of MAME called Wolf MAME that I know a lot of leaderboards, like certain MAME ones, want you to use. That is pretty good.
Use Wolf MAME.
That's pretty good at like clamping down on cheating. But I am sure, like Aquas is saying, you get someone determined enough, they're gonna blow right through all that stuff.
Yeah, of course.
And like that's like a project to these people. Like they just kind of want to do this just for the sake of it. You know, it's just like
for the
kind of shitty, but it's just what it is.
It's in the nature of humans.
Also, like when you're a teenager, you want to do crap like that. Like when I was a teenager, I did crank phone calls. Why did I do crank phone calls? Because I was just a teenager. Like looking back on that, it's stupid, but. Yeah, I remember
I had a friend who cheated on Counter-Strike and Battlefield, and I was like, man, I don't know, man.
Oh my gosh. Do you remember trying to play Call of Duty on the PS3, and there's like people flying in the sky, instant death snipes, and like it got unplayable because so many cheaters flooded it.
When it's that ridiculous, it's like you kind of need the bigger devs to step in or something.
Yeah. You just can't play anymore.
Well, it's human nature, I believe. It's also, well, Gödel proved mathematically that any system that it's competent enough can be broken. So what we need to teach people is not to break systems.
I actually have no idea what to do about cheating. I think this is like the big question mark for the speedrunning community as far as what they're going to do about it. Because the thing about shmups is if you're like a cheater, and there are cheaters in shmups, your reward is 10 people noticed your run. Like the stakes in shmups is so small that even if you're a rampant cheater like Shalanchi in World of Long Plays, it's almost funny because there's just I think the worst part of cheating in shmups is stuff like World of Long Plays where they just do task stuff and they don't tell you they're tasked, and so people watch it and think it's legit runs and they get millions of views. That does suck.
That kind of emphasizes this whole stigma of like shmups being too hard to get good at and stuff. If they're not legit replays, then people are like actually like watching them and analyzing them, then they're not going to want to like actually play the games at all.
Exactly.
Aquas, like that's actually the problem with that.
Have you seen Shalanchi's Dodonpachi run? It is absurd.
No, not really.
The dude is he's dodging the patterns in a way that makes no sense. There's a part in Dodonpachi where it shoots these pink waves and you're supposed to time yourself between the waves. He dodges in between the individual bullets of the walls. That's like impossible. Not even a world Japanese player could do that. And he like no misses Hibachi with shot type. I mean, it's like I said, it's so absurd that it's funny, but it's also not funny because, like you said, new players watch this and they're like, these games are literally impossible. There's no way.
Like I'll never do that. Yeah, it's just like it's not a good thing to establish.
It also kind of gives it does a disservice to players like Jamers. Where I remember when I first watched Jamer's channel, had he not had his annotations, I would have been like, this guy is a little too good, you know what I mean? But he has his annotations and he explains how he's doing everything. And you're like, oh, and you learn and everything. I think it's also a disservice to his type of channel where it's a much more healthy, helpful video for people to watch because they actually learn the games rather than watching someone cheat their way through the game and pretend like they did it legit.
And you mentioned TAS, and of course you've already said a bunch about it, but maybe some people don't know what it is. And do you think there's a legitimate use for TAS?
I absolutely do. All I request is you put TAS in the video description. TAS, 3 letters. Put that in your video description. You're good.
And what does that mean for the people
that? It's not that hard. Tool-assisted speedrun, or I guess if it's for shmups, score play, I guess you could say that.
Just tool-assisted in that case, yeah.
Yeah, that means that you're using an emulator to do you can do it different ways. You can slow down the frame rate and play at half speed or 1/4 speed and then speed it back up. You can use save states to sort of chop pieces of save states together into a clean run. There's all kinds of little tricky ways you can cheat, or if not cheat, use tools to assist you, which can be very useful. For example, when we're looking for the score glitch in Dodonpachi, I was using tool assisted to just try and get the glitch because, I'm not a world-class Japanese player, but to even try to get it, to test it out and to see how it works and to explain it. Yeah, TAS has a lot of uses. All I ask is just put TAS in the video description. That's all you have to do.
Agreed. There's a bunch of stuff that it's amazing to just watch, no? For entertainment.
Oh, yeah. And often TAS players do end up finding strategies that become like legit strategies later on with some tweaking, or it's very useful. It's just you gotta just don't pass off fake runs as real. That's all.
And
like,
you were
with great power, right?
Yeah.
That quote. It's like that.
What were you going to say, Aquas? Sorry.
Oh, I don't know.
Sorry, we caught you.
No.
And so, talking about this, are there any features that you would like, or a wish list of stuff that you're missing in MiSTer that would be good to have?
Save states for the main cores. That's huge. But like, I'm definitely content right now because we got it on the GBA and some other stuff. But like, and the NES now, NES has save states. I don't think it's in the public build yet.
Oh yeah, I believe it is. I believe it is.
Oh, it is. Yeah, no, that's epic, man. Epic stuff right there. Because I mean, otherwise, like the alternative is getting flashcards and original hardware, and like that's a whole different thing. You're not using the MiSTer. But yeah, I mean, for people who want to use save states for either practice or just playing through games, I mean, it's just a nice thing to have. Everyone loves save states.
And you, Mark?
Save states. Yep, 100%. For Dodonpachi, I found this guy and raised some funds for him to make a trainer that makes it so you can like level select and things like that to help you learn the game efficiently. But there just is not beating There's just not beating save states. They're so
those trainers
so
are super nice. I think they got one for Alpha 2 and 3. I think.
Yeah.
And some of the fighting games that have been coming out because the fighting game community has been taking notice of the MiSTer, obviously. So it's like those guys are hardcore.
Yeah.
So they're gonna need to be able to practice on this thing somehow. I guess the PCB it's a little bit harder, but like I guess it's like you go into versus mode or whatever.
Save states is
Don't
definitely
let the guy play, but
save states is definitely the big kahuna. But another feature that I personally think would be cool is they could add some sort of fast forward. I like to use fast forward when I play shmups, like so you can fast forward through like transition screens and stuff. I don't know if the MiSTer could pull that off, but I think it would be cool if you could have a little fast forward button so you can get through credits or transition screens or
it's there for Game Boy or GBA, just like Sentient says.
Nice. Yeah, I'd love to see that in the Cave arcade cores or on Neo Geo, stuff like that. Yeah.
Overall, I'm very content with the MiSTer. It's got great options for you in general.
Yeah, it certainly has.
I think maybe
remembering your configurations is always nice.
Yeah. Maybe
different video settings.
Maybe you could add a little bit more to the auto fire. It has pretty good auto fire settings, but maybe make them a little bit more adjustable, a little bit more flexible. Because in certain games you need like super specific auto fire settings.
You mean like one every X frames, right? Or
yes.
It's like triggered to be sync.
Like in Grega.
Well, they recently had added smaller increments to the millisecond auto fire setting you could do.
Oh, well then maybe they already added it, because when I was doing it was like increments of 25 or 50 or something like that.
It was like 32 or something like that, and then like they added 16 or something increments. There's a smaller increment, but what I would actually like to see is just like increments by each millisecond.
Yes, because some games like Grega, you need exactly.
I actually been commenting on this.
Thing is that sometimes, like in some arcade PCBs that you place they are synced to VSync, right? And if you have it to VSync, it's different that you have it every X milliseconds, because when you need it every X milliseconds is because the frame rate changes and you have a controller that's separate from their hardware, right? Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I believe that having it attached to every X VSyncs or every VSync or every 2 or every 3 would be the way, right?
Well, I guess if you could adjust it every millisecond, all else fails, you could just dial it, one more up, one more down in the worst case scenario. The thing about shmups is sometimes you can get a little weird with your auto fire rates, where like in Mushihime-sama, you're like putting auto fires on auto fires on auto fires like Kiwi does. I mean, it can get a little out of hand in the world of shmupping, but I think that would be a nice addition, just very precise, because I think MAME added that, like really precise control over your auto fire.
And maybe the audience doesn't know why auto fire is used in shoot 'em ups, and maybe they don't know that many PCBs have it as an option. What can you say about that in the basic level?
Do you want to go first, Aquas?
No, I'll let you go.
Oh, okay. I
got
actually
another
made a
comment.
whole video about auto fire and shmups and how I'm a big supporter of using auto fire. It's probably an interesting divide between speedrunning and shmups, because speedrunners, like I was watching the Ninja Gaiden world record progression from Summoning Salt, and he's talking about like the best runners mash like there's no tomorrow. They're like the best mashers. And in shmups, some people, are still about the mashing and everything, Twin Galaxies, for example. But I personally think you're pressing that button so many times, especially if like you're trying to do Dodonpachi chaining, and some games have built-in auto fire, which is nice, some don't. But from what I understand from the fellow shmup players, auto fire on the firing buttons is fine. And then auto fire, you can't auto fire on the input except up until a certain point in time. These are all JHA regulations that are weird, where basically you can do it on P47 aces, but not games after that. So in summary, shmups are much more lenient and permissible with auto fire, because the Japanese players went auto fire crazy and they built all their special auto fire
Or a commander.
and yeah, well, they built special circuits to get specific auto fire rates on like Rega and all these different things. So it's much more accepted in shmup.
Have you seen the Rako PCB, for example?
No, I haven't.
I just put it in the chat, and it's I bought one from Shoot 'em Ups for Same Same Sama in particular.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and you know how that's usually called pain because the rate that you have to keep up, right?
It's a very hard game.
Yeah, unfair. I prefer the Genesis port, to be honest, in terms of gameplay. Much easier.
Twin Cobra would be a good go-to. way easier.
Yeah, way easier. I can do that. I can't do the...
Yeah, those Reiko PCBs are cool. I was going to mention, too, that TurboGrafx controllers have auto-fire switches on them, which was, that was just... accepted because it was actually in the default controller. However, I don't think the auto fire rates on the MiSTer can exactly match that, to my knowledge. I don't know exactly, but like I guess it gets really technical on how the actual TurboGrafx auto fire it works versus like something like the MiSTer implementation.
It's a good you mention it.
It'd be kind of nice to have TurboGrafx take a closer look at that. Maybe have a specific auto fire settings for that core.
Yeah, which match the original controllers.
Because that makes a difference. Like for example, Bonk's Adventure speedrunning.
Mm-hmm. Like
in that game, if you rapidly tap the button or use auto fire, Bonk can float in the air with his little head spin.
Yes.
Well, that the distance you get from the head spin differs between the auto fire rate, and so as I understand, the MiSTer can't get that exactly the same as the TurboGrafx auto fire setting.
Yeah, most
at the
probably.
highest rate. So in that sense, you don't have an accurate reproduction of the TurboGrafx. So I'd like to see that improved.
That's a really good point. And yes, the controllers have their own timers inside, which are completely separate from the console. So it doesn't know what it's doing. It just sends the button as if you were pressing
crazy.
it. Yeah. And they wonder if the PC Engine Mini covers that correctly. And I don't think so. But
it's a small thing, but like it's just
it's important because
issue. Yeah.
For speedrunning, this is very, very important because it's a different thing. It would just split it into a separate platform if that doesn't match. Sorry, right?
Yeah, so I'd like to see that evolved a little bit. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be
because I love the TurboGrafx. That deserves it. It's such a good system. The TurboGrafx library in the US it's so many good games, and then there's like a million more for the Japanese library. But
And he also got so much love in MiSTer in particular. I've personally verified
I've loved
that
playing TurboGrafx in the MiSTer. It's so good.
it's really, really good. If somebody is listening that hasn't tried it out, it's amazing. They matched the audio with MD4A. They revealed the whole thing last year, and video is so good. I've just compared with the 240p test suite output from each real console and the MiSTer, and they match pretty good.
It's nice.
They obviously aren't exactly the same because you're talking about different things, but in placed in a PBM and switching between the sources, you don't notice the difference. That's what's important.
Yeah, exactly.
And well, talking about are there any disadvantages that you find from using a MiSTer instead of an emulator, for example?
Lack of save states. For Donpachi, I have to sometimes still use RetroArch because I just need those save states for the chain practice.
It's pretty close for me. Like, I got the RAFnet SNES to USB converter, and I love the SNES controller. That's the best controller out there, in my opinion. And I can get the Super Famicom one, or I can get the American one going, and it's just great. Like, hell yeah. I mean, then of course, there's the Snack and Blister and all that for using the actual controllers. But just going USB through a converter, like that's a perfectly good option.
Yeah, and it's really good that you mention it because most people just obsess with the perfection and least latency, right? And you guys that do speedrunning are okay with USB, and I'm okay with USB as well. People would be surprised that I don't calibrate to the precision that I'm expected to, I guess. But it's so close that it's really, really good, right?
Like right now, my MiSTer, I got like the SNES controller through the converter. I got an arcade stick in there, and then I got PC, the Hori Fighting Commander Pro. I got that one in there too, and those three controllers, like I can change the sticks out whenever I want. I got a couple sticks, but like between those three things, like I'm set.
Yeah.
Like anything I want to play, I'm good.
You can change on the fly, right?
Yeah, and just change on the fly if I need to, and I'm only using. I only have a 4-port USB hub, but the other port has the keyboard. I always leave the keyboard plugged in.
And now that you mentioned the keyboard, what about playing with keyboards? What do you think about that?
Well, I haven't messed with like MSX stuff and all that too much, but I mean, the MiSTer can do it. I mean, we didn't even talk about any of the old computer cores, but it does it all.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, but I was talking instead of a joystick. Do you have any experience with that?
I don't prefer to use keyboard for my input method, frankly.
No. I know there are a lot of really, really strong players, especially Toho players, but also also cave players like Juju Kanopi and Prometheus. They play on keyboard. Keyboard's really strong input method for shmups. There's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. I personally am not that great on keyboard, but if you get a real nice mechanical keyboard, you can do some very good damage. And I mean, people can argue that it might be the best input method because of how quick you can get the inputs in there.
Yeah, definitely keyboard players could consider MiSTer for sure. I mean, that's definitely a great option.
Yeah, and trying to play something like on like a SNES with a keyboard, like on original hardware, you're gonna have to get real crafty to pull that off. So that's another huge advantage for keyboard players.
Yeah, for sure. I've not measured the input latency for a keyboard on MiSTer, but it would be fun to have to get to know what that works for.
All the keyboard measurements.
Yeah, imagine that.
Oh man, that'd be so many different keyboards. Just when you get like the keyboard like enthusiasts out there like buying these old crap keyboards for expensive money and whatnot. Like I've never owned a mechanical keyboard. I always just use like the one that comes on my computer.
Mm-hmm.
I have one for work where I can type at work faster, but I actually don't I don't really game on them. I've tried and tried, but I'm just too addicted to the arcade stick. So after a while, I just plug in my arcade stick.
Yeah, of course. And about your favorite games, which you usually play in your channels, what can you tell us about them?
Oh, as far as MiSTer goes, or like in general?
In general.
Oh, well, that just kind of depends on the week and month for me. I mean, I kind of go in between different things. What am I liking recently? I've been playing a lot of Smash TV and the Super Nintendo on the MiSTer.
I've seen that.
That's a really cool port, and yeah, I've been loving that. Like, actually, like speaking of the Hori Fighting Commander, I actually prefer that controller for Smash TV and the Super Nintendo, because on that Super Nintendo port you use the face buttons to do the directional shooting instead of the second joystick, which would be the arcade style, be a twin stick shooter. But I use the Hori Fighting Commander Pro because that has bigger face buttons, so it's easier for my thumb to roll around the face buttons and get those inputs. I actually do not prefer the SNES controller, original controller for that. So it's like, you do get these little advantages for some stuff like that. And for me, I've been loving the all the Jotego cores. I love Capcom games. Like, that's just been so awesome. I love all those old Capcom
Nakamura, Daimai Kimura.
Yeah, that's been fucking awesome, and like it's such a great library to kick off the MiSTer arcades with, and man, it's just we're coming to a close with the CPS2 beta with Jotego. He's gonna release the public version probably in like a month or so here, and that's gonna be great, and it just really makes me happy to be able to play a lot of these games, because like they honestly, like all these pre-CPS Capcom games, like the emulation on them is just not perfect. Straight up, like especially the sound, like the sound is not perfect in MAME.
Yeah, Yamaha is so hard to deal with, right?
And it's really shocking that when you play some of these cores and how different they sound. It's amazing, honestly.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned the Genesis Mini against the original hardware, because it also uses FM synthesizer and it lacks the same feeling. It's FM sound is so pure when you hear it right.
I've heard from people that are Genesis heads, like MiSTer's got the Genesis sound pretty on lock right now.
Yeah, they did an amazing work.
I can attest to that. Like, I can't notice a difference. I have a Genesis myself. I play Alien Soldier on it sometimes, and I load it up on the MiSTer too, and I don't notice a difference. It always sounds epic.
There's no difference that I can measure, at least. And the Alien Soldier is...
So yeah, that's kind of like... Yeah. Go ahead.
Alien Soldier, what can you tell us about that?
Oh man, that's an epic game. I mean, that's a Treasure masterpiece from the company Treasure, of course. Game that's kind of minimal stages, but focused on boss fights, and kind of ahead of its time with having like a game with only a boss rush.
The next 68,000 on fire.
That's just really cool. That's just a really top notch game with great gameplay.
It's like
good difficulty, great music.
Cuphead in the 90s, right?
Pretty much. Like, the bosses are great. Like, you can really see all the little how all the sprites come together on the bosses, because they're like kind of piecing them together on the Genesis, not just like one full thing. It's like man, it's really great. That game's something I got into once I got a MiSTer.
Have you tried that one, Mark?
I have not. No. Sounds pretty awesome though. Treasure. They make amazing games.
Yeah. Favorite Treasure game?
Oh, Sin and Punishment.
Oh, so fast.
Yes, I love Sin and Punishment.
No Radiant
You all
Silver
thought
Gun
it
there.
was going to be Ikaruga, didn't you? Nope.
No,
Sin and
I thought it was going
Punishment's
to
my
be Radiant.
Oh, that's another great one. Radiant's my favorite Treasure shooter. Or shmup,
Okay.
But my favorite Treasure game is Sin and Punishment.
And Gradius 5.
Gradius 5's very good. Maybe I go back and forth whether I like Gradius 5 or Silvergun better. They're both very good.
Yeah,
both
they
very
are.
different.
And about you, Aquas?
Oh, I think Treasure made Light Crusader on the Genesis.
Yeah,
that game was
did.
pretty sick. Yeah, that game's sick.
Oh.
Really good game.
That's not a common...
I mean, that's kind of like not like their usual fare.
Yes.
But it's like a really great like kind of action RPG, isometric style.
Yeah.
With some puzzles and stuff.
It's kind of an underdog, right?
Like Landstalker and stuff. Yeah, that game is really cool. I highly recommend people play that. That's on the Genesis Mini. That's how you know it's good, because that Genesis Mini selection's pretty solid. I would play all the games on that list. Same with the TurboGrafx Mini. They did a great job with those selections.
Agreed.
You gotta play all those games. They're super good.
I completely agree. The selections, the license selection is really good. Maybe there's some stuff missing, but what is in there is good.
Yeah.
And what have you playing lately, Mark?
Well, I've been playing a lot of cave stuff, a lot of also trying to play a little bit more retro stuff. Like for instance, I played some Castlevania Rondo of Blood. That's not a shmup, but
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of fun with that.
Oh,
I just did a review on Dangan Feverun. Been playing some
Love
Darius.
that.
Did an episode on Darius. About to do I've been doing some beat 'em ups too, like Fight and Rage and Batman Returns. I'm about to do one. But of course, on my channel, you're going to see a lot of cave shmups. That's one of my main passions. So on my channel, you'll find a billion videos on Doronpachi. And then I'm also working on a Ketsui Omote clear, that Tual Omote.
Wow.
That might take a few months, but that'll be cool. So you'll probably be seeing me playing a lot of Ketsui and Zero Ranger. I did a Zero Ranger Tual. I'm going to play Zero Ranger in an event coming up here. Love that game. If y'all haven't played Zero Ranger, that's a shmup. I think even if you're not all that into shmups, you should check out. I think it's a nice introductory game into the genre. Very unique. Also has a lot of influence from Radiant Silvergun. Speaking of Radiant Silvergun, so it's got a lot going on. Definitely check that game out.
That's really good suggestion. I love that you mentioned cave and mentioned it apart from retro stuff. I think the same way, but man, they are retro too.
Oh, I know, right? I always think of cave as like a thing all
as
its own,
new,
but,
right?
yeah, as new, but no, it's 1997. That's not new. That's retro.
And
maybe they're so ahead of their time though. They gain like an extra 15 years. Like maybe.
Well, the thing is with like cave games, like the first time you play one, like you're like, whoa, like 2D, like they actually do 2D games like with this much detail,
I know.
like, and
They're
then
so
then you
underrated.
actually then once you start to understand the gameplay, you're like, what?
Yeah, they're insane.
Like it's that insane, and like
Yeah.
that's even like with shmups in general. Like for me, like when I got into shmups, it was because of Raiden Fighter's Jet that I played in the arcades, and the only reason I like was so fascinated was because I saw the people were actually doing like scoring tricks, and I didn't even like understand the concept of scoring tricks being a thing in a shoot 'em up at that time. And I think once you once you kind of understand that type of thing exists in a shoot 'em up, and it clicks with you, like it kind of just is a snowball effect from there for people who really like shmups.
It's a meta game, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a full layer that many don't see. What would you describe for people that don't know shoot 'em ups as these meta games? Because it's not a single one, right?
Well, it's like you have your traditional style scoring, which is just killing all the enemies typically. But a lot of these older style shmups do have scoring tricks too, like Star Force, one of the older shmups from 1984, I think by Tekhan, aka Tecmo, and they had like scoring tricks for like the fucking like the enemies like closing in on you, but you gotta like rapid fire before it closes in and like kills you to like get a big bonus, and like there's a bunch of stuff in that. But like, yeah, I mean, if you start like learning about that type of stuff and like doing it in runs, and like you're like, oh man, I'm getting like some big points from this, but then you're getting extra lives, and then extra lives are getting you more gameplay time. So it's like that. It all adds up to making that experience more impactful and you know, more fun to play. And it's just yeah, that's like the big thing about shmups that maybe some people still don't get if you're not into that genre. Is there's just another layer in a lot of these games, especially cave games. They go pretty deep.
They like play with themselves, right?
Almost too deep.
When you master survival in the first stages, then you start mastering the layers on top, so you don't get bored.
Some games go a little too deep; it can be overwhelming. But when you find a game, like for me, like my best advice is like you gotta try these different games and find a game that has that like scoring trick or mechanic that really clicks with you, and like it's lights out from there. Like you'll be chasing all sorts of different shmups from that point, trying to see like what kind of different things that they do, and every game has its own thing.
Yeah, I
also think as a genre on a whole, they pushed the concept of playing for score so much further than any other genres that I think a lot of like modern gaming design is just way behind shmups in terms of playing for score. Where I mean, people have played Doronpachi for decades, and still, I mean, the game's not done. Same with Ketsui, Garega. I mean, they just kept pushing the game design further and further, and they're like an arms race between them and the players that no other genre really has, where the devs just kept making the games more harder and more powerful and more complex, and the players just kept pushing back, and it's a beautiful thing to behold. So I do hope people start getting into the meta side of shmups a little bit more, like general fans, because there is a lot there. People, they seem more interested in it with speedrunning. People love the world record progressions and speedrunning. Shmups have that same stuff. There's so much going on within the genre that I do hope that starts to catch on with more people. That's one of my big hopes, because once you get the feel for shmups, once you start chasing scores and following other players, it's not, you're not going to find it anywhere else. You're not going to find it in any other genre. There's nothing that's going to quite compare. So yeah, I'm a big shmup fan, to say the least, and I do hope more people give them a shot. And you'll take your lumps in the beginning because the genre will beat you down, but the more you play it, the more you'll get hooked, and the more you'll start to see just how immersive the gameplay is, and you'll start to actually look at other games as slow and boring and like, let's get on with it. And shmups just come at you full force all the time. So
yeah, I love a good traditional shmup where it's just shoot stuff to get score and stuff, but there's usually at least something somewhere that's going to be like the meta, like in Sidearms Hyperdyne, the Capcom game. Like that's just basically just shoot stuff and get the point items. But in the end of the game, if you suicide like on the tail of the final boss, you get like a huge score bonus because it's a bug.
Okay.
So the meta there is to go through the game without dying, get all the point bonuses, and then execute this score trick at the very end of the game. And like that's that.
It's like a no miss bonus. Kind of.
Yeah, and if you get that even just like once or twice, like you've already like beaten all the scores in like a Capcom arcade cabinet.
It would be interesting to know if do you damage it if you crash into the tail?
I don't think so.
If you damaged it, imagine if you killed it with the same last life.
That's
basically
that's
like
some Garega stuff, right?
I know.
Yeah, it's an interesting like little thing, but like I mean it's just it just kind of gets a little bit more deep as you kind of go through the years. I think the scoring elements kind of get a little sophisticated as time went on.
But also, I believe there's a basic layer that it's more engaging than people give it credit for, because the games are designed in such a way that you get this adrenaline rush, and you get some frustration, and then some panic, and then again you feel powerful, and the design is there to make it work on the first level, right?
Well, and then if you're playing active, trying to learn from your mistakes, that's a big difference too.
Yeah.
Because shmups are
not credit-filling, right?
I mean, they're hard, but I mean, it's only because there's certain sections that are hard. And then once you go into the game, think trying to analyze where you're making your mistakes, you can really go a long way from there. And it's kind of like a mindset that you kind of have to take on. And I feel like a lot of people might not be going into these games with that mindset. And that is a detriment because that doesn't allow you to enjoy them to their full extent.
What do you think?
Well, also, I had an interview with none other than Aquas, and Aquas had this great, this is on an older episode of the podcast, and he had this great quote that I often repeat to people, where he was saying, because we're talking about the difference between speedrunning and shmups, and a lot of speedrunners have a problem with shmups because shmups auto-scroll, and they, speedrunning, you want to hold forward, that's like part of the fun of speedrunning. Aquas had this great quote where he said, once you start speedrunning, I think we're talking about Contra, you're holding forward all the time anyway. It becomes a shmup because it becomes an auto-scroller. And that's how shmups...
It really does.
Think about shmups like that. It's like the game is running... It's like if you taped down the forward button on Mario and you couldn't untape it. You had to do everything else while Mario was running forward. That's how shmup level design is, or good shmup level design. You're just running headlong at the game at all times, and you can't stop. You can't run away. You must engage. You must fight.
I love that.
It's such an underrated aspect of shmup game design that, I think speedrunners, if you change your mind from, the game scrolls, so I can't hold forward, to, oh no, the game is just holding forward for you.
Hey, you don't even need to hold forward.
You don't need
anymore.
to hold forward. Now you can move around and fight while holding forward.
And like do all sorts of other weird things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really fresh perspective for people that haven't engaged on it, but it feels so I don't know. It's so engaging, right? It's addictive in a way.
Well, yeah, that's why shmups are awesome. It's like an adrenaline rush because you are forced into those situations, and if you were just, I mean, with speedrunning, it's like a platformer. Like you don't have to play it fast. I mean, most people won't.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so they won't experience it the same way as a speedrunner would, and etc. So it's like it's just a matter of with speedrunning, it's like for a lot of people, it's like experiencing the game a different way. But like with a shmup, it's like that's the only way you're going to experience it.
What's really fun about shmups too, especially watching live shmup events, is this isn't a knock on speedrunning. Some speedruns are much more exciting to watch than others, but sometimes when you watch a speedrunner, you actually don't know if they're messing up because they're like, oh, that was a time loss. That's a time loss. You're like, what? You know, unless you have the trained eye, you don't know if they're messing up. What's fun about shmups is you don't need a trained eye because their ship explodes and they die if they mess up. And so you could not know anything about a shmup and watch a live demonstration and still be on the edge of your seat. And I think like your run at GDQ, Aquas, like you showed this, no one knew what Moochie Moochie Pork was, and everyone was like freaking out because they know if you die, you explode. And that's all you need to know if you're just watching. And so shmups, I think, are not only fun to play, but they make great spectator gameplay as well because, especially live, because you don't know what's going to happen. It's life or death.
That's definitely true. For me, like it's even hard for me to spectate a speedrun without even having played the game before. If I haven't played the game, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I don't understand why this is important, why this is impressive. Mm-hmm. But once you play the game and at least play the game, like it gets a lot more interesting. But yeah, with shmups, it's more of a simplified.
It's more like a raw experience, the player against the machine, or as I like to being described. Every single time that you play a game, it's like you're like playing a theater or a play, and it's between you and the computer, and every single run is a different live experience, right? And a shoot 'em up, it's very close to the metal experience with you and the machine making this happen.
Yes, and you can
get that like DJ experience
in a spectacular way. That some speedruns. You can fail and it's like a little bit embarrassing, but it's just not the same as game overing and the game being like, you suck. And then everyone in the audience is like, oh, dude. You know what I mean? There's something about shmups that's so concrete and brutal.
Yeah, it is.
And some games do tell you suck if you game over. Which is
yeah, some of them do. Blazing Star.
You need more practice.
Are you asleep?
Yes, are you asleep?
Yeah, are you even awake? No, something like that on Blazing Star. I don't remember.
Or in Ketsui, there's like this.
Yeah.
When you came over.
Oh, but you gotta love the game over screen for Batsugon.
I can't remember what's that one.
No, when every single voice sample is played back.
I just never game over in Batsugon. Oh. That's the problem. I never game over.
That's a good one.
I just remember that weird continue jingle, I think, from Batsugun, where it's like the guy going like...
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Or whatever.
It's like you were mentioning about the remix with the voices at the beginning of the program. That same kind of thing, but with the voice samples of the game. And now that we're on that subject, do you prefer Toaplan or Cave?
It's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, I know.
That's a good question.
Well, I mean, they're so different. I mean, none of the toe-playing games have advanced scoring systems like Cave, first of all. So it just comes down to if you prefer a traditional style or if you prefer a more sophisticated scoring experience.
Do you think it's...
For me, Cave.
Okay.
I love toe-playing, though. Flying Shark is one of the best shmups ever made.
I love that one. Shisho-same.
That if you play Flying Shark, like that teaches you shmup fundamentals, and you're good to go after that.
The plane speed in Flying Shark is so good.
Yeah, it's slow. Yeah, it's slow. It teaches you how to move around the screen because you can only move so fast.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, it's really good.
Such a smart design.
And do you think a Toaplan game is harder than a Cave game, or no, for a beginner?
In some ways. In some ways.
I mean, yeah. On one hand, you have with the old style games, you have the bigger hitbox with the ship, and that's harder to negotiate for some people. With Cave games, it's like people don't understand that the hitbox is tiny, so that's another thing. But once you understand it's tiny, then you have to reframe your mind into thinking, okay. Then we reframe your mind to think, okay, the ship's tiny, And then also, are the bullets tiny too?
Mm-hmm.
And then so it's always for me. It's like whenever you play a modern shmup, like learn your hitboxes, just intentionally die and find out what's going on. Because otherwise, you're just probably not gonna. You're just gonna like be freaking out all the time because like a bajillion bullets are passing by your ship, and you should be like, oh, I should die.
It's way closer to how you drive a car, right? That you have to feel the machine.
The problem is that
man.
Toplan made
good
a game
experience.
called Truxton 2.
Mm-hmm.
And that game is ridiculous. That game is a nightmare in difficulty. Cave's made some really tough games too. I feel like Truxton 2 like tortures you mentally, so maybe not. Maybe like in human damage, it might be the worst.
And the length of the stages, right?
The length.
Yeah,
of
rough checkpoints and heavy HP on the mid enemies.
Oh, yes.
And also the patterns
Mid
are
enemies.
quite. Also the patterns are quite fast and
big
difficult
fat
to read.
hitbox.
But the graphics are so pretty, man.
Yeah, but that's part of the abuse. That's like you know what what's that called? Damn it! I almost had the joke there, but like codependence, right? Like it keeps bringing you back just to slap you in the face, then you come back and slaps you in the face again. It's domestic abuse. So the answer to that question for me is Cave, but to be honest, that's unfair because you could put any X and then Cave. I will always choose Cave. Nintendo or Cave, Sega or Cave.
Well,
like anything you put there, Cave will win. I'm a Cave fanboy to the depths of my core, so I will always say Cave.
That's
Rising,
good.
Well, one thing that
Rising and Cave are close, but I'd still go with Cave.
Yeah, it depends on the era of Cave that you're analyzing. And favorite Cave game?
Dodonpachi.
Fast. Good.
I think I like Muchi Pork the most.
Really nice.
Probably the one I spent
I've
the most
only-
time
Crazy
playing,
about
but-
Cave is not only did they make an amazing array of powerful, awesome games, but they made games that are so unique from one another, like
Mhm.
Guange. I mean,
Mhm.
what that
Yeah,
game
and
is out of
Guange,
left
yeah,
field,
Guange
but
is
that
sick.
game is so awesome.
It's awesome. And it's
and then
already...
Dangun Feverun,
Can't wait for that core.
Futari. I mean, these games are incredible, and I feel like no matter what people say, there is at least one Cave you're gonna like. If you're a shmup player, there's gonna be one that you will like. There's gotta be.
What do you think about Side Yo-Yo?
I wish I could give a good review, but I feel like the 360 port is too flawed for me to know what the potential of that game is. So if I had an EXA cabinet and I could play it in proper low input lag, proper port job, I could tell you. I'm not a fan of the 360 port though at all. I think it's pretty
playing
bad.
the arcade mode in 360 sucks.
Yeah,
but it looks amazing.
Yeah. So someone mail me the PCB and I'll give you the review. I mean, let's just make this
You
simple.
play the Xbox 360 mode on the 360 port though, and that doesn't have the input lag.
Oh, really?
So you can at least enjoy that mode. Yeah, it does not have the same input lag.
Yeah, it feels really
kinda
different.
Stupid.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's if you want to enjoy SDJ, that's probably the way to go.
You know what's hilarious
that
about
port goes.
SDJ that we're talking about? I made a video about this. If you play it in 480i
Hmm?
versus 1080p, it actually has less slowdown in 480i.
Wow,
Like,
really?
the port, yes, I have a side-by-side video on my channel comparing the two. Playing it in 480i produces less slowdown than playing it in 1080p.
And have you tried 480p?
I have not, but who knows? I went with the extremes. I went the extremes with the least, resolution versus the most resolution. Who knows in between? Maybe it's like a little...
I'm guessing 480p would be the same as 480i, because it would be
Who knows?
kind of
I
the
don't
same
know.
load. Yeah, I think so. And
Could be.
your favorite Cape game, Aquas?
I think it's Muchi Muchi
sorry,
Pork, but I like Guange. Guange is one of my favorites too.
He didn't accept your answer of Muchi. You need to pick.
No.
Sorry.
I was thinking that Muchi I've only experienced on the Xbox 360 port. And
Yeah, and
I like
that
I like
port.
that in Guange a lot.
That port's a little rough, from what I've heard. Is that right?
I have no idea. Is it,
Aquas
Aquas?
is not right. It's a little inaccurate.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Okay,
Get it.
I could be wrong.
Maybe
I'm thinking of the Pink Suite side of things.
And when you play those ports, what do you do? Do you use convert them to 240p or place a scanline generator between the PGA out of the Xbox 360 or play them in 480p?
I just do 720.
720, okay.
Me too. I do 720p as well.
Try a scanline generator on the Xbox 360 with a VGA cable. You'll love it.
I have one.
Oh,
I'm just
man.
too lazy to plug it in.
Come on, it's
I
just
do.
two cables.
I have a VGA Xbox 360. I have an Extron that I could plug it into, and it could go to my CRT. I just need to stand up and plug them in.
I know. Which Extron do you have? You have a Moshe?
Extron and Moshe too.
Yeah, they're really nice.
Oh, super! I'm looking at it right now. Super Extron and Moshe too. It's got the extra. I don't know what the super does, but it's super.
I only have the regular Super, so I have no idea what the 2 does.
I don't know. It has component and it has S video.
Okay, a component. No, mine only has RGB and S video.
Ah, see, I got the component. That's probably it.
Yeah, I guess so. That's what the 2 should be doing.
Do you have the anti-flicker mode?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've only used it on the non-interlace mode, really.
Me too.
Yeah.
Anti-flicker is kind of cool, but yeah, I use it in the non-interlace mode as well.
Yeah, and RGB is really good. Composite looks surprisingly good. It's not accurate conversion, but it looks really, really good. I have been using it with the MiSTer, as a matter of fact, when we were testing color spaces, but it wasn't accurate enough. Yeah.
I use S video out of mine.
Yeah, this was
Because
just for testing. Mm-hmm.
My CRT can't accept RGB because it's an American CRT.
Yeah,
So
typical.
It takes S video.
S-Video is really good, and component is amazing. So those options are.
Yes.
It's good that we have them. Oh, they're mentioning Air Gallet and Raiden X. What do you think about those two?
I've never played Air Gallet.
It's a very, very nice looking game by Junjo
It's
Inoue.
old school. It's old school, isn't it?
Yeah, by Gazelle, an offshoot of Toaplan. It's really nice visually. It's the same art.
Air Gallet's really good. It's a great traditional shmup.
Yeah, it's the same guy that did the art for Espredo and Gugwange, but all pixel art. So it looks amazing.
Yeah, you do yourself a favor trying Air Gallet.
Let me take a look at these graphics.
Exactly, Aquas. It blows your socks off. You have to watch that intro.
The tracked mode.
Yeah.
That's what they say in the attract mode. Yeah, a lady.
Exactly.
Blues your socks.
I love that. I just love keeping that in attract mode and saying that. I love it.
I love the intro in that game is epic.
Yes.
One of the best shmup intros I've ever seen.
Yes. It's very cinematic.
Yeah, the graphics are really good. I'm watching a rocket take off. It looks impressive.
The music is also epic.
Mm-hmm.
It's like its music sounds like it could be performed live.
In my stream, I made it last week, I believe. I placed the PCV live streaming all the sound test and intro. So there it is.
Oh, you got the authentic.
Yeah, I had a very good deal like 10 years ago, so I couldn't resist. I'm really bad at it, but I love it.
Kind of reminds me of Raiden. I'm looking at it now.
Yeah.
It kind of has like a power-up system like Raiden. Got the laser, everything.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward game with some nice patterns and some good ass bosses.
And the good thing is, I'm not saying
not
I have
overly
no
difficult
insider info, but it uses kind of similar hardware to all Toaplan 2 games that use the same cave hardware for 68,000. Not exactly the same, but very similar. So that's good.
So you're saying there's a chance.
I say there's a chance. I hope there's a chance to be more precise. So, well, I think that we covered everything that we had. I don't know if you had any more information that you'd like to share with the audience.
I was going to say, one thing that the toe-playing games that the cave games don't do is, in toe-playing games when you die, is usually a checkpoint.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah, so learning to recover from a checkpoint is like its own art form and like skill you need to master.
I love it.
Uh-huh.
And that's something that you don't really have in a cave game for the most part. A lot of the times you just like pick up all your power-ups again and you just go back to the madness.
And it's interesting.
But that is something that's definitely lost between the two.
And it's interesting, in their interviews, they mentioned that serves several purposes. First, that it's fair in the terms of you have to cover the game knowing your basics and you go back, like in the training modes of M2 games. That kind of same idea. And also so that it's in sync with music of what's happening in the stage.
Yeah, I mean, like in Flying Shark, for example, and like some in those similar era toe-playing games, like they have like all the different areas that you can die in. So it's like literally like fucking like 50 different checkpoints throughout the loop. So like you end up like learning how to recover from these different spots, and some are harder than others, obviously. But I think they specifically went out of their way for Flying Shark and Twin Cobra, I think, to make every checkpoint recoverable. So I think that's always a noble design choice for these older style shmups, when they make it just challenging enough for you to come back when you die. Because that is really one of my favorite thrills of a shmup is recovering and coming back from a death.
I agree, and just reappearing
you
feels
can't
different,
that.
right?
You can't ignore that. Like a Gradius game, like people think Gradius syndrome, like you die in a Gradius game, you're screwed over. But no, like put in those 10 quarters or 10 credits or whatever, and do this. Grind that same checkpoint over and over, like you will eventually probably get through.
R-Type.
Unless you're playing Gradius 3 Arcade. Unless a couple checkpoints in that are like unrecoverable.
And what do you feel about R-Type?
Most of them are. I mean, I'm more of a Gradius fan than R-Type fan, but I mean, kind of similar deal there.
R-Type
Because
Leo.
like you kind of got to get that shit back, your force back and whatnot.
Have you guys tried the final two? R-Type?
Oh no, I played the 5th.
I have. Yeah, I have. It's cool. I think it's pretty good.
And
I reviewed it, and I had a very controversial review. 'Cause I thought it was a noble effort. It was solid, but it wasn't quite there, so I didn't recommend it, and all hell broke loose. So,
oh boy, yeah.
I think it's close, but not quite.
Yeah, and it's good to keep the bar not that low, right?
I would think so. I would think so.
And what would you expect M2 to work on for this year? What would be your golden choice?
Well, they're trying to release this Toe Plane collection, as I understand. So I guess there's that. And what else to look forward to?
Uwange.
Well, there's the MiSTer core already in the works.
Yes.
I think it's like that's kind of competing with the M2 ports now for me.
So the dream for me is that they release
those M2 ports are great though.
Dodonpachi, and they have campaign version on there. That is the golden dream. It will be the one time on my YouTube channel where you will see me do one of those Maximilian Dude reaction videos where I go like, "Oh my god," and I do front flips. Like that would be huge if they released Dodonpachi, proper port, because all the Dodonpachi ports suck, and then have the campaign version, which is a lost version of the game that is not playable anywhere, not even through emulation. It's locked away on some PCB somewhere. That would be the golden, that would be huge. But one I've been waiting for that I think is likely, but for some reason we haven't seen it, is Batrider. I mean, where's Batrider?
Yeah.
We got Grega. Where's Batrider? So
yeah, that should be coming because
that's huge.
PS5 is out now.
And
yeah, Batrider would be huge.
Yeah, it would be amazing. Do you like?
And
it'll be on the PS5 when it comes.
I feel like it makes the most sense too, because there's no port of it, not even a bad port, and they've done Raising before. They've done Grega. It's like Grega's sibling game.
Well, they've already said they did most of the work on it. It's just the PS4 didn't in PC performance with those performance issues.
Yeah, so that would be the big
Look forward to that.
If they release that on the PS5, it'd make me buy a PS5.
And what about Backrate? Do you like that game?
Yeah, I want Batrider first.
Okay.
Yeah,
Backrate's I can do a 1cc on Backrate, so I am partial to that. I can't do that on Batrider, so...
You know what? If you like Backrate, there's a fun mode in the Battle Grega port that I made, a custom mode, where you can make it play like Backrate.
Okay.
Look on my video. It's like, look on my channel. It's called like Bullet Hell Grega.
Okay,
and
got it.
You can have all these strategic suicides, and I show you what settings to change. It's actually really fun, and it kind of plays like Backrate.
Yeah, I love Backrate. I don't know, I clicked really good with that game. Or is it simply that I wasn't bad at it? I could once see it, so in the hard, not the hardest. Just
it's a fun game.
Yeah,
it's
a
really fun game.
I love the music on it. It feels good.
Yeah, Rising's my second favorite shmup developer after Cave.
Yeah. And from the Rising games, which do you prefer of the Maho series?
I haven't played them all. I've just played Sorcerer Striker, and I like that one a lot. But I've been watching replays of the other ones. They all look really interesting. Probably the second one, right?
Mm,
That did Dimahu?
Okay, yeah, yeah, and there's
That one's probably the best, right?
Diamond, who's
That one's
really
probably
amazing.
the best.
Yes,
Yeah.
Shippo Mahoda Sakusen is so strange. I like it, but
Yeah.
it's so strange.
There's a great video of that on Shmup Slam 3. Kaio played it, and he had really entertaining commentary. That's why I recommend it. It's really fun watch.
And what about you, Aquas? Which one do you like best from those?
I don't know. Like, I guess probably the original. I haven't played Dimaho that much, and I have actually played Shippu Mahoda Sakusen, aka Kingdom Grand Prix, for 1cc, and it game's pretty good too. But I mean, yeah, Dimahu is just it's on another level than those other two games, big time.
If you like Garega too, it's got kind of a polarity system going on.
Yeah,
it has an intense amount of sophistication. The items that you gain from using the different color type charge shots, it's on a whole nother league in my opinion.
And it looks amazing
too.
too.
That would be a prime candidate for an M2 port because of the gadgets they could add, where you could see the item list and everything.
That would definitely be helpful.
But if M2 are listening, get to Batrider first, and then do.
I'm sure they're working on it right now.
And then do Dodonpachi, and then just call me and ask me what to do next, and we'll talk it over.
In technical terms, not talking about the gadgets or everything else, it's easier to make Batrider or Dodonpachi. But licensing or gadgets or modes, which is what
Dodonpachi is kind of a nightmare because there's like an Atlas involvement with Dodonpachi. So I don't know if that would be a barrier or not.
I hope not, but
yeah,
it's such a shame. And
Atlas kind of strikes me as kind of a cool company. Maybe they'd be down for it.
So you've mentioned Dodonpachi several times. I love the series. So taking and I mentioned SDOG basically because which one do you prefer taking those two from the list?
DOJ or Dodonpachi?
Mm-hmm.
DOJ is the better game, but I like Dodonpachi more. There's your answer.
Good. And what do you think about Daifukatsu, either of you?
That is
too flashy for my taste.
That game is uber popular right now. That is the game to play right now. It's very popular. Yeah, a ton of really high level players are playing it. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff with it. I think its stock is going up. I think if this keeps up more. I did this little survey. I didn't finish it because I want more people to answer before I finish. But I've got about 150 responses, and looking through the responses, it seems like the most popular shmup right now is DFK among the player base.
Interesting.
I polled. Yeah, it's very popular.
I have the arcade poster. Just you open the door to my house, and that's a poster in your face.
Nice.
But it's
a pretty big departure from the other Dodonpachi games.
Yeah, it feels
it's
so
a
different.
good game, though. It is a good game.
It's not my favorite, but I wasn't as bad in it as in the other ones. I believe that canceling the bullets helps a lot for accessibility, and then it complicates things.
I think the idea was to kind of refresh the series for newer fans, like potential newer fans, I should say. Like the Autobomb system, all the stuff they add. It's really great introductory game for players who haven't played cave games before.
And what do you think about Dodonpachi 2?
Oh, B-Storm?
Mm-hmm.
The greatest ROM hack of all time.
It's really fun.
It has a fan base. People love that game. Obviously, in quality, I think it doesn't compare to the DDP series, but taken on its own merits, it is quite a game, and it is pretty... I was just moments away from the 1cc in that game. Just moments away. It has a hilarious sort of weapon system, too, with the charging and all that. It's a fun game, though. It's definitely fun.
You, Aquas?
Yeah, don't sleep on B-Storm. It's decent.
Yeah.
It's funny. It was my first Dodonpachi game that I got physically. I was buying locally, and I bought.
Did you get the cart?
Yeah, and I got it like for
cool.
$2, something like that.
What?
Yeah, it was in a bunch, a group buy that I bought. I bought some Neo Geos, and the guy just told me, "I have this card. Do you want it?" It had no label. So I knew it was PGM, but I didn't know what game it was, right?
That's
because
cool.
I didn't know by memory the numbers in the ROMs. And so I bought it, and it was Dodonpachi 2, and I was, wow.
A $2 PGM, I mean, roll the dice. You're going to get something.
Yeah. And,
that's awesome.
And PGM in general is that solid library, so
yeah,
it was a no-brainer. So, anything else you want to add? Sorry?
I'm all good.
Get me out of here. 3 hours.
Yeah, 3 hours. Thank you very much for staying with me this 3 hours. It was very
Been
entertaining. You barely needed my input, and that's good. That's nice. And I believe that we covered all the themes that we wanted to. Please tell the audience where they can find you and the things you're working on. That you have amazing channels and content to share with them.
All right, I'll go first. Yeah, you can catch me on Twitch /Aquas. If you want to check me out, do various stuff that I like, and then the SCG Weekly channel on YouTube. If you want to check out some people talking about shmups as well, always good there. That's about it for me.
Awesome. Thank you very much for staying here and your talk. Mark?
Cool. So you can find me on my YouTube channel, The Electric Underground. So go to my channel, subscribe, and then start watching all my videos in reverse order, doing thumbs up and commenting and just saying I'm the best, and tell all your friends. My YouTube channel is definitely my main focus. But if you want to come and yak at me in the Discord, I also have a Discord called Shmup Revolution 2020 Discord. It has a lot of activity and a lot of cool stuff going on in there. So those are the two places you can find me. I have a Twitch channel, but I stream on YouTube more than Twitch now. So every now and again, you'll find me playing music I'm not supposed to play on the Twitch channel. But other than that, you might find me on YouTube.
That has been a touchy subject as of late, right?
Well, my plan is I'll do it until they ban me, and then I'll just be banned. Because I prefer to stream on YouTube anyway.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I had a great time talking with you. Sorry about all the technical issues that I had.
Oh, I didn't even notice. Oh, you mean when you dropped out of the call?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, not a problem. That's the
It
par for the course.
Yeah. But, well, thank you guys, and thanks to everybody for listening, to Katrinix and Sentient 6 and all the MiSTer community. And, well, hope to see you around soon.
Adios.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.